everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. The show, of course, presented by our friends at FanDuel. And we got a lot of space on the show tonight to have conversation with you guys. I mean, actually, really got a lot of space in the offseason to have conversations. So questions, comments, thoughts, feelings on coach searches that are going on, quarterback ideas, other things that should be in the spotlight this offseason. We're going to start with Brian Flores' situation and then get to a lot of the rest. Might have to talk a little bit about Kirk Cousins redoing his contract with the Atlanta Falcons and maybe just have some fun times. We've got a draft sim ready to go. So let's begin, though, and throw your questions, comments, and reactions into the comment section here, and we'll run down what's going on in the league, and then we'll get to that. But good place to start is the Baltimore Ravens firing John Harbaugh. Now, it wasn't that shocking. I saw a lot of reactions like, wow, I can't believe they actually did it. But, you know, I mean, Harbaugh, it really felt like it came down to that last game with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and somebody posted a photo of the goalposts, and on the left and right, it was, Mike Tomlin fired, John Harbaugh fired if it, goes through the middle. Or I guess it's the other way around. It would be Harbaugh fired if it goes wide, right, or left, and Mike Tomlin fired if it goes down the middle. But it really felt that way in the Pittsburgh and Baltimore game. Like, whichever one of these guys loses this one is probably going to lose their job. And there's even still discussion about Mike Tomlin if they get smoked in that playoff game. Somebody who's been the head coach of a team for almost 2 decades and has won a Super Bowl rarely gets fired, but it is the hardest place to be in the NFL when you have one of the top 5 quarterbacks and you have not gotten there yet, especially in today's world. Like, this is not exactly Don Shula being the Miami Dolphins coach for the entire time with Dan Marino. I think if that had been the case, that he probably would have gotten fired. And, maybe it would have been the same thing for somebody like Marv Levy with the Buffalo Bills, that after they lost the 4th Super Bowl, maybe they would have fired him because the outrage would have been so high. But, actually a historical example of this is probably, if we go back to like a John Elway having, was it Marty Schottenheimer, then Wade Phillips, and then they finally get to Mike Shanahan and they build the roster and they get over the top with him, that not all top 5 quarterbacks always have the same coach for absolutely ever. And the interpretations of Lamar Jackson and his relationship with John Harbaugh seem to be all over the place, but one way or the other, John Harbaugh is out with the Baltimore Ravens, which opens up the door for another potential opportunity for Brian Flores. And just perusing the internet today, I grabbed a couple of the tweets that were out there from football Illuminati, one of them and Skip Bayless, just because. Aaron Schatz, Skip Bayless, Mina Kimes, Jonathan Jones is a reporter from CBS, all mentioning the name Brian Flores with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, you would think, well, don't they want to go out and get a quarterback whisperer type of coach? And that may be the case, but it also could be that their defense has corroded over the last couple of years, and it's possible that they feel like they need somebody who can grab the reins there and turn that back around to where it used to be a few years ago with the Ravens. They might also feel like if it's Brian Flores, that yes, he can pick up that defense and get them back to a championship caliber level, but also maybe bring in Brian Daboll with him as well, because the reporting that was out there today was that John Harbaugh would not fire Todd Monken, who is their offensive coordinator. And that's interesting that he would be the one that they wanted fired, because just look at last year. Todd Monken was being celebrated last year for how Lamar Jackson was playing more complete quarterback. And then 1 year later, boy, how much can change in a single year. But 1 year later, you're talking about firing Harbaugh because he would not get rid of the offensive coordinator, which makes you think that Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson were maybe not on the best terms. So if they're going to bring in someone like Flores, can he connect with Lamar Jackson? Can he turn around the defense and then bring in somebody from that Belichick tree as an offensive mind? That would be, I think, the thought process for them. But I would be a little bit surprised because I do think that what you're looking for is more along the lines, if you're Baltimore, of an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes type of thing, where those two guys can just stay connected, for the foreseeable future. John Harbaugh was never an offensive head coach. He was a special teams coordinator and then becomes a head coach. And he's much more of I'm managing this entire thing rather than I'm the guy that's calling the plays for offense or defense. And, maybe there is a disconnect there with your quarterback when you're more of the manager of the entire franchise as opposed to, sitting down with Lamar Jackson every single day and designing the offense in whatever, with his vision. But as far as Flores' chances to go to the Baltimore Ravens, it seems like he fits with a couple of different franchises, but the odds are not appearing to be particularly high that he lands a head coaching position because as of right now, there have been no head coaching interviews or reports of upcoming interviews for Brian Flores. Ian Rappaport had the list today of the teams that the Las Vegas Raiders were looking to speak to, and Brian Flores' name was not on that list. And the Raiders, for me, were the top one when we did our offseason predictions the other day. I had Brian Flores going to the Raiders, and it's pretty easy to make that connection. They have Tom Brady there who knows Flores. They might want to kind of buck the trend of the NFL of keeping Flores out of head coaching positions because they're the Raiders, and that's kind of the history, is that not always playing by the rules, right, with Al Davis. And Flores is the type that we've seen totally overhaul a defense as he did in Minnesota. When he arrives with Ed Donatel, it was a joke on the defensive side. And then, a couple of years later, we're talking back-to-back seasons of elite defenses. So I thought maybe that would be something that they're looking for. But if you are the Raiders, you're probably thinking, we're going to draft Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 overall pick, and we need one of those guys, one of those quarterback whisperer type of quarterbacks to connect and get your QB1 and get your head coach on the same page. It can be hard for defensive coaches to get opportunities when you're talking about younger quarterbacks. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has often spoken about his experience with Brian Flores on his podcast with Andrew Whitworth, talked about it and called him a dictator in Miami. We also know that Tua, while I think it has been justified a little bit how Tua has played out in Miami, still Tua had what he had to say about, Flores dealing with him as a young quarterback. And I think if you are concerned about that, personally, I think that Brian Flores has learned a lot during his journey, and that I'm not the same person as I was 3 years ago, and you're not the same person that you were 3 years ago, and you learn and you get better. And there are lots of coaches who have had things go by the wayside in one location and then turned out to be a better fit in another one. But if I'm hiring in Las Vegas, I might be concerned about putting a young quarterback with Brian Flores. And we've even seen this with the cornerbacks and defensive players, that not many young players have connected particularly well with Brian Flores. I mean, he might need a more veteran type of group. I mean, if you're going through his strengths and weaknesses, being a brilliant football mind is his strength for sure. But a weakness might be player development. It's not like we've seen a lot of young players come in and then all of a sudden, they're emerging to the front of the room. Even someone like Jalen Redmond, I mean, you look at his actual age, I think he's like 26 or 27. He had been a pro in the UFL. He had been around the NFL a little bit with like the Carolina Panthers. So he was an older player when he got here and still had, a year to show what he could do, and then another training camp and so forth. Josh Metellus had been in the league for several years before he took his step forward. And even a young player like Ivan Pace, who I think his weaknesses kind of got revealed, but Ivan Pace, kind of just ended up on the bench by the end of the year. There was no real development of players like Mekhi Blackman or Nashawn Wright, who ends up as a starter for the Chicago Bears, their draft picks from 2022. Not that I think those guys were going anywhere, but they didn't give it any time at all. They just, pretty much cut bait. So that would be a concern, I think, if you're another team as well. How is he going to work with a total rebuild situation that might require a lot of development for young players? That's why Baltimore suddenly makes more sense, because that is a situation where you're looking for a coach who can get you over the top. And while the Ravens lost that game and Lamar played pretty well, they lost it on defense, right? Like, they could not stop the big plays from Aaron Rodgers down the field passing. At the end of the game, Calvin Austin roasts his guy, scores a touchdown. I mean, right? So, I think that makes more sense for a team that is in absolute holy bleep win now mode every single year that Lamar Jackson is their quarterback. Now, that is another thing, though, because, a lot of the thinkers of the National Football League media are talking about how Flores would be a good fit, and I could see it because it is a veteran quarterback. It is someone he's gone to battle with and is familiar with even this year. There's also a possibility that Baltimore has decided to just completely blow it up. That is still in the air. And I wouldn't have thought so. I would have thought, it's just a power struggle that Lamar Jackson won. But today, Mike Florio was on the air in Pittsburgh, and he said he doesn't think that is 100% lock that Lamar Jackson is still going to be there. Personally, I think that is crazy talk. It's a 2-time MVP, probably deserving of 3 MVPs. And when you have somebody of that level, you don't ever let that person leave your franchise, especially when they're in their 20s. I mean, if he was 35, then okay. And if his skills were fading, I think the injuries are a serious concern. But somebody of that caliber, I just can't see it. This team, though, Baltimore, was hesitant to give him huge amounts of money just a couple of years ago, and it cracks the door open for the possibility. And an agent did tell Mike Sando of The Athletic that if Lamar's going anywhere, a place to consider is certainly the Minnesota Vikings. So that's one where we would really need some concrete evidence that Lamar Jackson could go rather than just speculation to really have that conversation. But I think you all know how I feel, which is if you have a chance to go after a quarterback of that caliber, of course, there's going to be reasons why you have that opportunity. There were reasons why the Denver Broncos were able to get Peyton Manning. It's because his neck was fused back together. There are reasons why the Bucs were able to get Tom Brady. It's because Tom Brady had declined in New England. It turned out that maybe his supporting cast and his coach had also declined at that point. But anytime you're getting somebody like that, you are getting them for a reason. Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets and the Steelers as an all-time great quarterback, but he goes there because he had declined in his talent as well. Or Brett Favre goes to the Jets and the Vikings because they were ready to move on to Aaron Rodgers. So there's always going to be a reason, but oftentimes the teams that have rolled those dice have had success in doing so. So of course I would be on the side of, if you could get Lamar Jackson, find a way to make it happen. And the same goes for Joe Burrow as well. But there's another quarterback who's going to be out there, my friends, and you can't deny the possibility that Kirk Cousins could return to the Minnesota Vikings. They redid his contract in Atlanta, so now they have a decision to make. It's either give him $67 million of guaranteed money or let him loose. I'm just going to go ahead and guess that the Atlanta Falcons will not be giving Kirk Cousins $67 million of guaranteed money in the early part of March. So they will be releasing Kirk Cousins and making him a free agent. And the relationship, there are pluses and minuses to this. And I don't think anybody would look at bringing back Kirk Cousins and say, wow, what a great idea. Because you're talking about 2 years removed from where he was in 2013 and 2023. And the irony is that Cousins at the beginning of 23 is playing some of the best football that we had seen him play, but that team was not ready yet to win as a complete team. If you could copy and paste early 2023 Kirk with his healthy Achilles to the 2025 Minnesota Vikings, this team is winning 13 games again because he was playing really, really well, especially against San Francisco, especially against Green Bay before he got injured. And with Cousins, he knows the offense extremely well. Kevin O'Connell knows the ins and outs of working with Kirk Cousins, the pluses and minuses. He performed pretty darn well down the stretch. Did not throw the deep ball that great, but executing the offense, play in and play out. Cousins did a good job and won some games for the Atlanta Falcons. And he could get the ball to Justin Jefferson. We do know that. Jefferson put up all those record-breaking numbers with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. So if there is a thought that, look, maybe JJ McCarthy needs another year behind the scenes is what he really needed, but they had no other options this year. And I'm still convinced that if Carson Wentz had played well, we wouldn't have seen and stayed healthy. We wouldn't have seen JJ McCarthy again, and it would have turned into a developmental year. You could put it that way. I think if they do it, that means they're done with JJ McCarthy, but you could always frame it that way, that Cousins would be coming in for 1 year to take a shot at it again with a much better roster than he had in even, I would say, in even 2022. This is a better roster and a much more complete defense if they get Brian Flores back. But even just player for player, the amount of pressure they can create on the quarterback, Dallas Turner emerging, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, it's more complete. And while the cornerback and secondary room has some questions, I think it's better than it was in 2022, where they were really relying a lot on Duke Shelley, if you recall, and Andrew Booth Jr. and DeCaleb Evans. This is a different story now. So that would be your argument for bringing back Kirk Cousins, is that it's clear that JJ McCarthy needs development behind the scenes, and Cousins can get you through another year, get you back to the playoffs, give you a chance. He's looked a lot more healthy than he did in 2024. And okay, there you go. You've got your starting quarterback. Now, of course, the reason not to do it would be if you have to sit down your young quarterback for an entire season to play a guy who's been historically a mid-pack level of starter and now is a back end of the league type of starter and was benched for Michael Penix. It's not really very promising to swinging for the Super Bowl. It feels exactly like 2021, where they made a lot of moves to swing to try to get to the playoffs and keep their jobs. That was really more of the goal. And that's what it would feel like with bringing Kirk Cousins back. But you talk about irony. The irony of Kirk Cousins signing for potentially a reasonable amount of money is just, you can't make that stuff up, right? That the entire time we all agreed, and look, there are other things that held them back with Cousins, but I think we all agreed that if Kirk Cousins had been paid $10 million by the Minnesota Vikings in 2019, 2021, years where they had pretty good teams, that they could have added those other pieces and they would have been in the playoffs, or they in 19, maybe they're more of a Super Bowl contender, but it was always the big cap hit that was holding him back and the short-term contracts that gave them no flexibility and all that. If he came back for $12 million, it's just like, come on, man. Oh man, it's possible though. And Kirk was on Kay Adams' show and he was asked about, hey, are you going to go anywhere where you have to compete for a starting job? And he said, well, obviously I want to play. And that's the thing about JJ McCarthy in a Kirk Cousins scenario, is if you sign Kirk Cousins, that means he's been told he's QB1 from day one. And that means that what they've seen from JJ McCarthy is just simply not good enough. And his odds of ever getting back on the field become pretty low at that point. And in doing my research about JJ McCarthy for an article I'm writing about all the quarterback options, which there will be a podcast, but one of the things that stands out to me is that the quarterbacks that played at this level, there's not a lot of them that their team was super patient with. And the example that I'll use in terms of statistically close is EJ Manuel for the Bills, because I was there for that, but also they each started 10 games. So you have like the exact amount of performance there. And he went 4-6. McCarthy went 6-4, but one of the games actually two of the wins he didn't even finish. Max Brosmer had to win the one against the Giants, and then against the Packers, they're not even playing their starters. So how much do you make of that? But in terms of the actual performance, like the yardage, the touchdown interception ratio, the turnovers, the sacks, all those types of things. And by EJ Manuel's second year, he didn't last until week 5. In fact, I think it was week 4 where he threw an interception to JJ Watt and got benched. So historically speaking, like, there is not a lot of precedent for teams in this situation when they want to win and have spent money and so forth, just sticking it out year after year after year. And if they were to go get Kirk Cousins, that would pretty much tell us everything we need to know about where this team stands with JJ McCarthy. In terms of an actual likelihood, I'd give it like a 25% chance. I don't think it's crazy, especially since Cousins said on the Netflix documentary about his first year there in Atlanta, he said that he regretted leaving. I imagine his first phone call is going to be to Kevin O'Connell, do you want me back? And we'll see if that's something that happens. Of course, it would not be my preference. I would rather roll the dice for a quarterback like Kyler Murray or Geno Smith that might have a crazy Jeff George season in them than the same thing that we've kind of seen before, and we know what that's like. But I will say this team is better. If we compare Kirk teams, I would say 19 was the best team that he played on. 18 was a good roster, but the offensive coordinator, that matters. So Kevin Stefanski, who's going to get another head coaching job and is won coach of the year twice, is his offensive coordinator. Gary Kubiak's here. Diggs and Thielen. Thielen had a tough year that year, but Diggs was great that season. The offensive line was probably the best they had while he was here that year. So, they were in the playoffs. They won a playoff game that season, but I still think if you compared what they have here right now and what we expect them to have to the 2019 Vikings, this is probably a better team. But also it's probably a worse version of Kirk Cousins because I thought he was very good that year. So wouldn't be my preference, but if Kirk is back, well, then time is indeed a flat circle, my friends. So there's kind of your rundown of the things that are going on. Let me give you the FanDuel question of the day, and then we can get into your questions and comments, thoughts, and feelings. And let's look at Saturday's game for the FanDuel question of the day. The Bears and the Packers, they have two quarterbacks that people love to argue about in Jordan Love and Caleb Williams. The over-under yardage total for Love is 220.5, and for Williams, it's 208.5. Which one of these quarterbacks do you think has a better chance of stepping up in that game? Who would you trust more, Caleb Williams or Jordan Love, as you're going to be hate watching that game as Vikings fans? So, all right, let's get to your questions, comments, thoughts, and feelings, and we'll go from there. Anything on the table? That's kind of the update of what's going on, that there's a little bit of buzz for Brian Flores and the Ravens, but as of right now, he has not gotten any, or at least reported, inquiries for him for head coaching positions, which if you are, looking for Flores to return, which I think everybody who follows the Vikings is looking for him to return, considering what he's done here, then that's a plus. If you believe in any sort of, justice in this world, then it's a minus, because that means that they've just straight up blackballed him from ever being a head coach, which is unfair. Well, he did have some struggles from a personality perspective. He also turned around a franchise that had ripped everything apart in order to tank on purpose and got them to winning records. So, that should be factored as well. Not just what Tua said about him or Ryan Fitzpatrick on podcasts. And that's all respect to one of my favorites, journeyman quarterbacks ever. But, and I'm not doubting his experience or insight there, but they won a lot of games with Brian Flores on not a lot of talent in Miami. And then what he has done in Minnesota, you would think that would automatically get you into the mix, because we're seeing a lot less qualified people. And again, no disrespect to Clint Kubiak, who I think has done a great job with the Seattle Seahawks, but that's kind of his first year of success. And as a coordinator, he went to New Orleans, had some good games with Derek Carr. Things fell apart there. And he was with San Francisco, always good. 2021 Vikings offense was up and down. I think it was above average, but it wasn't great. So his first real great season offensively, and he's a head coaching candidate. And you see this all over the league with certain people. And so for Flores to not get potential opportunities, it's clear if the Ravens don't interview him or if the Raiders don't have him in a second wave of a conversation, then he has just been put to the side. And then it comes down to, will he go to Dallas? They have not been hiding their desires to hire Brian Flores, or will he stay with the Minnesota Vikings? That might be what it comes down to. I would also leave the door potentially open for one of these teams who hires someone else to try to woo him away from the Vikings to be their DC. And that could also be the Baltimore Ravens. I guess any team would be on the table, but the Ravens would make the most sense because that's where he could potentially win. And if he doesn't want to stay with Minnesota, it's either a money issue with the ownership and they don't want to pay him what he wants to be paid, could be an issue of wanting a certain title, or just could be wanting a chance to seriously compete for a Super Bowl, which in Dallas, with him there, you've got a case. I think Washington's in a little bit of trouble here and doesn't feel close to getting back to where they were. Philadelphia is probably on the other side and may lose A.J. Brown next year. Yeah, it's a division, and the Giants are nowhere close, so it's a division that could be won. And then I feel the same way about the AFC North. If they hired Kevin Stefanski and he brought in Brian Flores as his DC, so I think for Flores, you're not out of the woods yet just because he hasn't had these head coaching positions. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, let's get to your questions, comments, thoughts. Oh, wait, hold on. I have a tendency to forget sometimes that we have very kind sponsors. And I want to remind you guys about our friends at ZipRecruiter. You know, Purple Insider is always growing and trying to take other steps. So if you work for a company and you're hiring and they're trying to take steps in 2026 forward, check out ZipRecruiter with new goals in 2026. If you're looking to add to your squad, they will help you conquer these challenges and achieve your hiring goals. ZipRecruiter right now, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/audio. It's not your regular old job website. They've got lots of tools that can help you out. The best ones, some of the best ones, including their matching technology, which will work fast to help you find top talent so you don't have to sit there scrolling all day and waste your time. And you can find out right away how many job seekers are in your area that are qualified for your role. So let ZipRecruiter help you find the best people for all of your roles. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate in the first day. See for yourself. Go to ziprecruiter.com/audio to try it for free. That is ziprecruiter.com/AUDIO. The smartest way to hire. Okay, now, after some stops and starts there, false start, we'll get to your questions and comments. Benjamin says Dallas Turner not a bust. That is true. And I think that because of the 2022 draft, you could see why. It went so badly, so fast that a lot of fans would see Dallas Turner not succeeding and say, oh my gosh, did they do it again? Did they get another terrible bust that doesn't even really get on the field or whatever? But one, every player is different. And two, I think we saw the flashes of Dallas Turner in his first year, but they were winning 14 games and they're trying to compete for the number 1 spot in the conference. And remember, Grenard and Van Ginkel stayed fully healthy in 2024, so he didn't get that many opportunities. And then even at the beginning of 2025, Van Ginkel goes down after he spent the entire offseason with them designing a role for him that was not, hey, just go be Andrew Van Ginkel. And I think that was a struggle as well. And then with the offense, it's actually really crazy because when you look at the number of pass rush snaps that Jared Verse had versus Dallas Turner this year, it's almost double the number of pass rush snaps. And a part of that is that they're playing from behind for the entire first half of the season, and teams are just handing off and handing off and handing off. I believe the Vikings finished the year with the fewest pass attempts against in the entire NFL. And this is kind of a Myles Garrett thing too, like his accomplishment. If people are trying to shortchange him, go look at the actual number of reps that he got. I think it's less than Michael Strahan, the number of actual snaps, because everyone's running against Cleveland because they're winning. So the same thing happened here, but the pass rush productivity per snap was actually about even between Jared Verse and Dallas Turner this year. I thought he took a huge step. And the biggest thing for me was, when I get an opportunity to talk to young players versus old players, very different feel sometimes, because veteran players, they've been around, they know the deal. If they've survived for this long, they're probably pretty sharp and they really get it. But young players, they don't know anything about how the NFL operates and what you need to do in order to have success. And what I saw from Dallas Turner was him figuring it out. And this goes back to training camp when we were talking about it a lot. And just chatting with him, his maturity from last year to this year, you could see he really started to understand it, but he never wavered in his desire to listen to Grenard, listen to Van Ginkel, listen to Brian Flores, listen to the rest of his coaching staff. To me, that was a good sign. He wasn't defensive about his production last year. I think he was realistic. Like, I need to take a step forward. And then he did that. And to me, they've got I wouldn't call him a foundational or cornerstone type player just yet, but somebody who is on the rise, who can do it. He can start. He can sack the quarterback, strip sacks, make plays. I think that having him drop back in coverage is just really, really tough. Andrew Van Ginkel is a different type of monster from almost anybody that I can remember in this era. There used to be guys like him under maybe Rex Ryan, 2008, something like that, where the 3-4 was kind of big. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers would make you think of a Jason Gilden or something back in the day who would rush and drop back. But there's not many guys who can do it like Andrew Van Ginkel. So taking over his role was pretty tough. When you see him get an actual chance to rush and rush and rush, you see the high-end potential of Dallas Turner, and he's someone that they should feel very good about building with. And that's why when we talk about the draft stuff, it's like, well, they have done pretty well based on where they pick outside of Lewis Cine. That trade down, of course, was a mess. And I don't know, if you draft Jameson Williams, there's probably a lot of struggles there through those first couple years. If you draft Jordan Davis, maybe you feel pretty good about that, but he took some time to get to where he is. But that draft, that goes completely bust. So now when you look at since then, their top picks have worked out, but they haven't developed other players. And some of the decisions there have made me scratch my head. Like, you draft Kobe King and feel pretty good about him, and then you just cut him. You have a Caleb Evans who, hasn't like emerged or anything, but you just cut, like, they just got rid of a lot of these guys because they were in, win now mode. But Dallas Turner emerging is a difference maker big time for how the drafting looks for the Minnesota Vikings over the last couple years. Let's see. Ryan says, even if they made that field goal, Harbaugh would probably end up being fired if they fell short of the Super Bowl again. Yeah, that's a fair point, Ryan, because it seemed like the relationship had just gotten tense and uncomfortable between Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. And it's hard to say exactly why. And we try sometimes these little things, like there was a local news video that at the end of the game, Lamar Jackson walks right by John Harbaugh and just like, see ya, I'm out of here. And then Lamar, as anyone, I think he's a little bit, I don't know if he's Gen Z. Is he millennial or is he Gen Z? But either way, whatever generation he is, went to Instagram and posted something that maybe didn't seem the saddest about John Harbaugh being let go. And it's funny because I had a conversation with a friend of mine who covers the Ravens during the owners' meetings. We were sharing an Uber. I was like, oh, what's Harbaugh like? That's got to be great. And she said, you'd be a little surprised that the players are not as on board with him as you'd expect for a team that won that much. And it was reflected in the NFLPA survey that he did not grade out as high as you would have expected for someone at that level. And here we are. But that's the real thing. If you don't win for that long, Sean McDermott is a good example of this. If Sean McDermott loses to the Jacksonville Jaguars, they might throw in the towel and just say, all right, look, we got to try something different here than running back the same head coach time and time again to get over the top. I think that it's the hardest. And I know Vikings fans would say, I would kill to be the Baltimore freaking Ravens with Lamar Jackson over all these years. But it's a different kind of position to be in of frustration. You know what it reminds me of? And I think the Wolves will win a championship with Anthony Edwards someday, but it reminds me a little bit of that, where the regular seasons just become boring and every little thing that indicates you might not win the championship makes you enraged and frustrated. And it's not just you as the fans, it's everybody inside of a building. The temperature gets turned up on a team when they have lived in a certain air, but have always come short of the teams with the other players like Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady for so many years. And Jackson lives in that air. I'm not saying he's Tom Brady exactly, but he lives in the all-time great multiple MVP, type of air. And if you don't win, you have to try something else eventually, especially if that relationship has soured. So you might be right that if they went into the first round and they got booted out, they might have fired him anyway, because it wouldn't be up to where their standard is set. I also think that their roster building over the last few years, it was so highly praised for so long and they made so many good decisions. But hey, we talk about this drafting all the time. What happened in Kansas City? What's happened a little bit on Buffalo's roster? What's happened in Baltimore? What do these teams have in common? Oh yeah, they're never drafting at the top. And if you're never drafting at the top, it's really, really hard to get elite talent unless the Vikings don't draft Kyle Hamilton. Well, then you can. But they were drafting 14th that year. Why? Because Lamar got hurt, right? Wasn't that why they were drafting 14th? Is that right? I can't remember now. But still, the point just being that they very rarely drafted high and they're always in win now mode. So then you end up with scrambling on the roster because you're not bringing in new talent. And of course, those three that I mentioned, they have expensive quarterback contracts as well. And it just, the league is designed to help the teams that are bad and hurt the teams that are good. And eventually it ran out for John Harbaugh. Mr. Mayor, do you think Flores would take Durante Jones to be his DC if he gets a head coaching position? If not, do you think he's the best guy for the position going internal? Well, that's a good question. I think their relationship must be good because they have worked really hard together on this coverage. And that's the guy that he will praise the most when he's talking about, Harrison Smith's role. And Harrison Smith has spoken extremely high of Durante Jones. He has been everywhere, and a guy who interestingly was hired initially by Mike Zimmer and then came back during Kevin O'Connell. And did he come back with Donatell and then stay? I think that might be the case, which probably says a lot about how Harrison Smith has felt about him, but he's coached in a lot of different types of defenses and has been instrumental in coming up with this Morpheus type of scheme that nobody can really put a finger on. So it's a great question. I've always had Durante circled as the guy who would take over as the DC if Flores left, but I didn't really think of that part of it well, wait a minute, would Flores take him with him to be his DC? I would say that's very, very possible. If Flores leaves for a lateral move, you could slide him into that spot. I also think someone like Raheem Morris would have to be considered by Kevin O'Connell. Morris and O'Connell were the coordinators in Los Angeles when they won the Super Bowl, but Durante has more than earned it, and he would understand better than anyone how to fundamentally run the defense that Brian Flores has taught these guys. And when we look at how much overhaul there's going to be in terms of the roster, the answer is really not that much on the defensive side. I mean, safety, you're bringing in somebody new, but who else? Really, the starting corners are going to be here. The outside linebackers, maybe Javon Hargrave is gone. I think Jonathan Allen is probably still here, along with Levi Drake and along with Jalen Redmond, and Eric Wilson maybe gets re-signed. I kind of would expect that. Blake Cashman's going to be here. So it's not like they're bringing in 12 new defensive players for a new defensive coordinator. That would be a reason to stick with Durante Jones, if, like you said. But it feels to me like not even getting an interview with the Raiders, that the chances just went down significantly, probably cut in half, that he gets a head coaching position. Now it's really because nobody else has put in for him. Now it's the Ravens or likely nobody. And then does any of those teams offer him the lateral move that would be enticing to him. So who is even good enough? Well, the Ravens are good enough. We know the Cowboys are good enough. Is there another team that fired their coach? I mean, you're not going to Arizona. You're not going to Cleveland. You're not going to, the Giants hiring Brian Dable over him and the sham interview or whatever. That's what one of the things that sparked the whole lawsuit. So I doubt you're going to the New York Giants. There's really only maybe two teams that could happen, but you're not entirely out of the woods yet, because it is possible that someone else gets hired as an HC and then makes him an offer he can't refuse. But, right now, after the first couple of days and the lack of buzz outside of the media people who are making the suggestion, it feels like the odds of him leaving have changed just over the last couple of days. Mike says, I like your idea of Geno Smith or maybe Jimmy Garoppolo as competition for McCarthy. I like my idea as well. Thank you. But with Geno Smith, the reason that I do like it is for 3 straight years, Geno Smith is an elite downfield passer. 2022, 2023, and 2024. He is a top 7 and sometimes even the best. In 2022, I believe he was the best downfield passer graded by PFF in the entire NFL. So when you think about that, who does that fit really well? Kevin O'Connell, right? His anticipation, his arm strength. He is a little bit on the older side and he's had some injuries, but that arm has not slumped. And if you look at the Raiders, just read Kalen Kaler and Ryan McFadden for ESPN. They wrote a piece sort of behind the scenes of the dysfunction of the Raiders. I'm not going to go ahead and blame Geno too much for what happened there, because holy wow. One was Pete Carroll just hiring his son as an offensive line coach, and he had no idea what he was doing at this level. And that's a big part of the piece. I mean, if you're asking Geno Smith, a guy who has struggled with offensive lines that aren't that great, to have an offensive line that has no idea what it's doing, that's a pretty rough gig. So I think that if he came to Minnesota, number one, because of his recent performance, you don't have to pay him a lot. If they cut him, you could also trade for him and maybe make them take some of the money. So, but he's not a guaranteed starter. That doesn't, trading for Geno Smith, the reason I like it is it doesn't mean that McCarthy is cooked. There are 5 or 6 guys, maybe 4 or 5, like Kirk, Kyler Murray, maybe Burrow or Lamar. Maybe there's only a couple. Maybe there's only 2 or 3 guys that if they got, then McCarthy's cooked. I think Kirk is one of them, and I think Kyler Murray is the other one. So if they got those guys, it's over. Those guys are starting. But if they get a Mac Jones or a Geno Smith, that's competition that you should be able to win if you're on your way up. But if you lose, you could still make the playoffs. And I think you'd be buying what do they call it? Buying the bounce or something in gambling when somebody has struggled a lot. Is that what they call it? I don't know. I don't know the gambling lingo that well, but we are presented by FanDuel. But I think there's something like that. Fantasy is like that as well. It's buying the bounce, I think, off the bottom, right? You'd be doing that with Geno Smith. And if you're looking for a guy who could get it to his top receiver downfield, I mean, he did that with, DK Metcalf in Seattle. So I like that idea. Jimmy Garoppolo, the thing about Jimmy is he kind of feels to me like a Carson Wentz. Like once upon a time, Jimmy Garoppolo was a pretty darn good quarterback. And I think it's a little unfair that he overthrows one deep shot in the Super Bowl. And it's like, Jimmy, he stinks. Like, well, okay. I mean, he got his team there, right? Or that they, run over the Green Bay Packers in the NFC Championship game. And it's like, Jimmy did nothing. I think he was a good quarterback. It was a very unique situation to have a defense and running game and offensive line that were that good. But, you've got those things, the wide receivers, the offensive system. It's just that the last time he played, it was so bad. And it's been a few years and he's on the older side. Could he play 17 games if you had him for 17? I don't think so. He's always had a lot of injuries. So then you're talking about maybe like if he beats out McCarthy, oh man, like that's pretty bad. That falls under the Wentz. Like I think if you had to start Wentz for 17 games and he could stay healthy, you could probably win 8 or 9 games. Like if Wentz had just taken over after week 2 and played the rest of the season, I think they would have ended up mostly in the same spot. That's where I'd be with Garoppolo. With Geno, you could see it being Jeff George. You could see it being this guy who everyone thought was toast shows up here, whips the ball around. There's a high end to that might be kind of crazy or at least entertaining, and tight games and big 350-yard performances or whatever that I don't see as much with Jimmy Garoppolo. But thank you. Friends of Taz says Jacoby Brissett would be interesting. He finished 7 overall in yardage. Never was a starter for more than one season. He falls under the category to me of a great backup quarterback, but only a backup quarterback. And well, he did throw for a lot of yards. It's kind of funny because the NFL was celebrating him setting the record for completions. They were down like 20 points the entire game. And he just completion. Like Jacoby Brissett gets sacked. He has no mobility whatsoever. He's a guy that can just sort of complete short passes. And that's about it. Like you're not going through a stretch of games thinking, all right, he's going to go 7-3 for you. It would take a miracle for Jacoby Brissett to do something like that. What did he finish? Like 1-11? And I know it's a bad team, but 1-11 for Jacoby Brissett, that's not going to save your season. I think they need to strike that balance of somebody who can, if JJ McCarthy travels the EJ Manuel route. Let's say he wins the job out of camp. They go 2-2, but he's really not any different than he was this year. You need to be able to pull that trigger and still make the playoffs and go, all right, Mac Jones, get in there. All right, Geno Smith, get in there. It's time. Let's go. Or if he's just not any good in training camp, you need to be able to do that. Mr. Mayor, I'm concerned our defensive personnel are so tailored to Flores' scheme that hiring a different guy makes them almost obsolete, like the Donatel guys that were obsolete after Flores took over. That's a fair concern, but I think if you look at the histories, now Andrew Van Ginkel is clearly the best version of Andrew Van Ginkel when he's been here, but even if you look at him after Brian Flores left in Miami, he was still a great player. When they signed him, I'm not saying I'm the only person in America who knew who Andrew Van Ginkel was, but this is why I use the data so much, because I remember reacting to the signing and being like, there's no reason for anyone to know Miami Dolphins, but this guy has crazy PFF grades. You got to see this. And that was after Flores left. So I think someone like that is still going to be good. Jonathan Grenard, his job is just to rush the passer. So whether it's Flores or not, he's going to win off the edge. I think someone taking over might have Dallas Turner in much more of just a rotational rush the passer role. That would help. But you're right, though. Like you're right. Some of the linebackers, the safeties, the corners, I think that Flores enhances the secondary by all the crazy rushes that he does. And now Isaiah Rodgers turned out to be a great signing overall. He finished 13th by PFF. We're going to go over that a little bit later in the show. But that's a guy where you would say if he had to play a different type of football where the other team's quarterback wasn't under duress, and the Vikings, they had the lowest average depth of target against the entire NFL, meaning that opposing quarterbacks threw the shortest passes against the Vikings. If that was not the case, are the corners and safeties as manageable as they have been recently? That is a very fair question, and it would be a reason to try to stay with Durante Jones and keep up with the same type of system. But, if you don't, and we saw this earlier, if you don't have Harrison Smith out there, like there's real questions here if they lose Flores. Because if you don't have Harrison Smith out there, I think Josh Metellus can do a lot of the same things, but Harrison is like an all-time great player, so it's a little bit different. There's certainly questions about if they can be the same level if they were to lose Brian Flores. Raymond says the Ravens, I believe, are a perfect fit for Flores. I think so too, because even this year, as many problems as the Ravens had, like look at the first game of the year against Buffalo. They get ahead. They should just win the game, and their defense falls apart. Like no one ever seems to mention it's just Lamar. Their defense wasn't that good, if not just straight up bad this year. And you're asking Lamar to win every game when he's banged up, and it's just like not always possible. So a revamp of that defense with the all-time great quarterback would be something that they could really use. And then if you're Flores, you get Brian Dable, who was there with Josh Allen, with the running quarterback, and you profit. I think it's a good idea. It's just, is somebody going to actually pull the trigger on Brian Flores and make that hire as a head coach? It's feeling less and less likely as he doesn't get any interviews. Zoomer KO says, when you move on from Sam Darnold, you're saying JJ McCarthy is an obvious baller. Not only could he not throw accurately, but he wasn't as high intangibles as a game manager, couldn't even run the plays. So this is the hard part about that, Zoomer KO, is you just don't really know what someone's going to look like until they get out there. And I would say that the extreme example is someone like Max Brosmer, who the coaching staff they were not making it up about how high they were on Max Brosmer. This wasn't just some sort of PR. I've seen that, like, oh, they're a coaching PR campaign. It's not. It's not. They really liked what they saw from him, but you go out and play the Seattle Seahawks defense and it's different. And the same goes for playing against Micah Parsons and the Green Bay Packers. It's different. I did see today from Ben Baldwin of, I think he's the Athletic, and I know him as an analytics person, that McCarthy in total played one of the easiest schedules in the NFL of opposing defenses in terms of pass defenses. I think Ben, the tweet, let me look up the tweet. Hang on. I'll find the tweet because I saved it. Okay. Yeah. So Ben Baldwin on Twitter tweeted out that McCarthy played this year 2 defenses that finished above average this season in terms of pass defense. And that was Detroit the one time and then Atlanta. And those were the only 2 defenses that finished even above average, and not that much. Every other defense in terms of pass defense, including, the Packers defenses, pretty much fallen apart since losing Micah. So that's a little bit different, but still, it's not like he played the best defenses ever, just speaking to your point, but you don't really know how someone is going to respond to the pressure, the atmosphere, the disruption of the pocket that they can create. And I thought that he improved his habits as he went along. Like earlier in the season, he was sort of jumping up with his hop, skip, and a jump throw and that kind of thing. And, against the Cowboys, he really led them to a victory that night. But from just practicing and just OTAs or just preseason, how do you figure out what it's going to look like in the real NFL with real teams playing against you? The only way to do it is by actually playing the guy. Now, if we're litigating last offseason, all the concerns that I had about JJ McCarthy, every single one of them came to fruition. And this goes for anything. I'm not like trying to pat my back or anything. I'm just saying, like, we always do that with every decision that the team makes. We talk about, here's how it could work, here's how it could not work, right? And with McCarthy, the biggest concern was he just has not stepped up under center many times in these real situations, and never in the NFL. No matter how much you like a guy in training camp or behind the scenes, or how much VR he uses, no one's going to murder you with VR. And I also think that they believed way too much in their ability to coach fundamentals and to coach the accuracy into him. And they believed way too much in their ability to set up a perfect environment around him. Like, if you think about even Sam Darnold's environment around him, they benched their right guard midway through the season. The left tackle got hurt midway through the season. They had to trade for a guy who really, really struggled. They had a well below average left guard who's now a backup. They had no running game really whatsoever, but Sam Darnold was able to work through those things. Is JJ McCarthy prepared? But Sam Darnold at 21 or 22 couldn't have worked through those things. Of course not. Sam Darnold at 21, 22 years old, if he was playing with multiple backup offensive linemen, no running game whatsoever, and his tight end doesn't even show up until halfway through the season because of an ACL injury and then is not the same person, probably not, right? You're probably not beating the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. That's 5 years of development to prepare Sam Darnold for that type of moment. And I think they thought, we've got so much here on offense that he'll just be able to do a couple of things a game, make a couple nice throws, a couple nice plays, and we'll just set up everything else. We'll just lay it on a silver platter for him, but they forgot stuff goes wrong. They didn't factor that stuff goes wrong around a quarterback. Look at Brock Purdy this year. I mean, Pearsall's hurt. Trent Williams is out at the end of the year against Seattle. And Trent Williams played the whole season, but, out against Seattle. He lost Deebo Samuel. He lost Brandon Ayuk. Like, their running game, they use it a lot, but they average like 4 yards a carry. Like, it's not anything special. He's learned over these years to be able to deal with some of those things in San Francisco, as all great quarterbacks do. JJ McCarthy was not ready for that. I think the chaos theory is the thing that they most forgot about that. So yeah, that's fair. And in terms of like running the offense, it's not easy, man. It's not easy in the NFL. Friends of Taz says, weren't the Bucks and Falcons trying to emulate Flores this year? Those coaches would be interesting. I don't think the Bucks are making a coaching change. I think they announced that Todd Bowles is staying. Bowles has always been one of the most aggressive. It's always Flores and Bowles at the top in terms of percentage of blitzes. And yes, the Falcons were a much, much more aggressive blitzing team this year than they were last year. Ryan says, if Flores gets a head coaching gig and decided he wanted to run KOC's offense, who would he take to be the OC? That I don't know. I don't know what his connections are OC-wise. Brian Daboll makes the most sense to me. Because, I know what you're saying, like this offense, this would be Rams related, sort of connected in a lot of ways to San Francisco. Maybe Kevin Stefanski is that type of person. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, then maybe we're talking about, potentially Flores and Stefanski, of a former Viking reunion. But that one's a little bit tough to figure out. But Brian Daboll with the connection to the Patriots would be the one whose name comes up probably the fastest. And I think that Daboll as an OC with Lamar Jackson would actually be pretty good, because it certainly was with Josh Allen. All right, let's see. Mr. Mayor, I feel like getting fired from being one of the 32 football head coaches in the world and working your way up from a position coach again would push you to change your approach. Well, I really think that with Flores, that situation, I think he was a linebackers coach with the Patriots and then became a head coach right away. So he hadn't even been, if I'm remembering this correctly, he hadn't even been a DC yet. And he was just thrown right into being a head coach. And when you come from the environment of the New England Patriots, is this not incredibly clear? That when you come from the environment of the New England Patriots, there was a certain way of doing things. And when Ryan Fitzpatrick says dictator, who does that make you think of? Oh, I don't know. Bill Belichick, right? I think that there's a certain approach and a certain personality type that they really liked there in New England that does not always translate to every situation. And he had a very young team in Miami that they were trying to build up. And also, I don't believe that he did a great job of putting together a coaching staff. They had co-offensive coordinators. That's preposterous. It's ludicrous. It is never going to work. Like, you need a guy who is in command of your offense if you're a defensive coach. You can't have two guys both trying to run the offense. It's just silly. So something like that, and the relationship with the quarterback, and watching Kevin O'Connell and Mike Tomlin. These are two, if you were to name the best culture coaches in the NFL, Mike Tomlin is probably an all-time culture coach. The fact that his team every year, halfway through the season, are they cooked? Are they done? Duck Hodges is their quarterback, or Mason Rudolph, or whatever, or hey, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be good enough. And at the end of the year, and I know it took a missed field goal. It takes some BS for everybody who just barely slips into the playoffs, but there they are in the playoffs again. So that's one guy and his connection with players. And the other one is Kevin O'Connell and his connection with the quarterbacks over these years. And also the way that he has built his relationship with these defensive players. Not all of the defensive players in Miami loved Brian Flores. It wasn't like, oh, the defensive guys love him and the quarterback hates him. No, that wasn't the case. I remember hearing from, I'll just call it a colleague, another reporter in the NFL, who, when they hired Flores, was calling around trying to find other players to talk about him. And there were some players who said, hey, I just don't want to be on the record talking about Flores. It wasn't a great experience. That's not everybody, but that's some. And I haven't heard that at all here in Minnesota. He is connected extremely well with these players. And you saw Stephon Gilmore and Anthony Barr, two guys that have nothing to lose by sharing their takes. And both of them go to Twitter. Because of course in the locker room, you walk up to somebody, although I always judge this in terms of specifics. I've probably mentioned this before, but if you walk up to somebody and say, hey, let me ask you about Brian Flores. And you say like, so how do you feel about him as a defensive coordinator? And they're like, well, he does a good job and whatever. It's just vague and kind of, I don't want to answer this question. You might get the sense like, okay, I don't know that this is really what I'm looking for or what I'm thinking is the truth. But every time I've ever asked someone about Flores, I mean, Harrison Smith comes back and cites Flores as a reason to come back to the NFL. Like, I love working with this guy. And Josh Metellus, somebody who Flores worked together with. Andrew Van Ginkel, can't speak any higher of him. A guy that has made Van Ginkel's career from a fifth rounder to a superstar, and Flores is there. So everybody has different experiences, but I also think that there's humans in general. We're always changing and growing and improving, and he's done that here. But can you explain that to somebody else? Maybe. I mean, maybe if they asked Vikings players who don't want to lose him, maybe. But can you, when it goes down so publicly, if he never sued and Tua never said nothing, then this would be probably a different story. But so much has been out there that I think that changes the dynamic. But I do think that Flores and his approach to culture and player relationships and stuff has been very, very good in Minnesota. How it was in Miami is now kind of years ago. It'll live with you, though. When something like that happens, it will live with you. Let's see. Class G says, what if the Vikings were the 7th team that called about John Harbaugh? I mean, maybe. I don't know. So that has been a little bit of the rumors out there of like somebody called about John Harbaugh that you'd be surprised, but we can't tell. It's the Scott Boras mystery team in baseball. There's always the Scott Boras mystery team that, hey, somebody called and who knows who it is. There's a mystery team. It was always the Twins, because then they would come out and say that they were in on whoever, right? They were always the mystery team. But yeah, look, I don't think the Vikings would do something like that. I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to change head coaches right now. The Vikings finished 9-8. If they had finished 4-13, I think we'd be talking about a coaching search, because that would have meant that the walls collapsed on TCO Performance Center and the locker room fell apart and guys weren't playing for each other anymore and there was total calamity. But in a similar fashion of Mike Tomlin, if you can keep everybody pulling in the same direction and you seek out certain types of players who are going to like a Brian O'Neill, who every single week that dude's just going to go play as best as he possibly can, regardless. And the whole locker room, and Aaron Jones and Gernard doing it, playing until he literally couldn't. If you have a locker room full of those guys and your message hits with those guys, then you're probably going to be at least in the mix year in and year out. And I think we really saw that from Kevin O'Connell. I've always felt like 2025 and 2026 was their window, and that unless things went insanely wrong, there would be no reason to change coaches. Now, they went very, very wrong at the quarterback position this year, but as far as the overall, you end with the same number of wins as the Packers. I mean, it's like, all right, well, it was bad. It was a bad season. It was a disappointment, but the way that it ended matters. And in different worlds, 9 wins gets you to the playoffs. It didn't in this case. So that's not to silver line anything. It was a huge disappointment of a season. You get to 4-8. The pressure comes completely off. You played really bad teams at the end. One team, you get your 9th win that's sitting their starters. I'm not patting anybody on the back. Just saying that, oh, wow, a guy who's a legend coach comes available. I wouldn't be running to fire your coach to hire him just because he's available. They fired him for a reason, right? Because they don't feel like they're getting the most out of him. So with O'Connell, at very least 2026 is good with me, and that's where the pressure is very, very much on to fix what ails them going into next year. If he didn't have a 13 and 14 win season in the past, might feel different. I might feel like, well, they'll never escape this thing. They'll never have a double-digit win season, but you can't feel that way when just last year they took Sam Darnold to 14 wins. Zoomer KO, the Stefanski Flores head coach DC combo in Baltimore would be their dream. Yeah, I think it'd be great. I still think Stefanski is a really, really great football mind who can run a team, but I don't know any one of us that could have gotten the Cleveland Browns the position that they were in with their quarterback, where Deshaun Watson forgot how to play football and then got hurt, and Shadur Sanders and all that nonsense. I don't know anybody who comes out of that looking good. Definitely don't. Ryan, how long do we have to wait before we can trade for a quarterback? Do you have to wait till March, or could something happen after the Super Bowl? It's kind of funny how that works sometimes, because teams will have those conversations and then the trade will sometimes come out a lot later. I think it was it the Brian Burns trade, where behind the scenes in that documentary about the Giants offseason, which they extremely regret, that they were cooking up the Brian Burns trade way in advance and then finally got that to go through. The Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff trade happened right in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. And then it wasn't like actually finished until the new league year, but it had happened. The teams had agreed to it. You could agree to it and then make it official when the new league year happens. That's usually how it would end up going. So it could, any day, yeah, you could, if you're trading for Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow, you could be on the phone with them today. You could come to an agreement on a deal, kind of handshake it, and then it's not something you can actually do until later. That could be the case. Yeah, I don't know, right? Because I'm pretty sure this is a rules thing that, deep into the CBA, but I'm pretty sure you can't make officially a trade until the new league year starts, because the trade deadline is passed and the year doesn't begin. But you can agree on it. You could certainly call and have that conversation. So you could be shoveling the ice out of your driveway, which has been super fun over the last couple days, and then get a notification from Adam Schefter that the Vikings have traded for Joe Burrow, or agreed in principle to a trade, would be how it would be put. But we'll have to see. I think that it's probably going to be resolved in March, like that. Kyler Murray will. Well, and that's a little different, because I think if Kyler Murray, if he gets released, they would do it after the beginning of the season. Would that be with a June 1st designation? It gets complicated. It'd be probably, I'm thinking that we will have this answer in March. That would be my guess. But at the combine, that's going to be pretty interesting with all the rumors and everything else going around and people talking to each other and so forth. Okay, let's see. Jim says no chance that Jackson goes anywhere with a new coach coming in. I generally agree with that. Friends of Taz, the new Ravens coach, is probably going to want to keep Lamar Jackson. Yeah, I would think so. Well, and that's the number one thing before they can really get into their coaching searches. They need to be able to tell their candidates, we are sticking with Lamar Jackson. So if you don't see the Ravens interviewing people right away, then actually get pretty curious. If it comes out 3 days from now and the Baltimore Ravens have talked to no one, then okay, like what's going on? Is there something happening behind the scenes with Lamar's future? Because no one's taking that job. You call up somebody's agent for Brian Flores. Hey, Brian, we'd love to have you talk with us about the job in Baltimore for a head coaching position. You want to fly down? Is Lamar staying? And if the answer is, well, we're not sure. Okay, call me back when you know. That's how that should be handled. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Like, do they start interviewing candidates right away? Because if they do, then Lamar's staying. And look, I still, Burrow seems more realistic than Lamar, and I kind of bounce back and forth on this, but Burrow, next year the contract gets interesting, and the Cincinnati Bengals are crazy, and they're cheap, and I don't think that they want to pay him. I don't know that Baltimore is cheap necessarily, but even then, they've left the door open in the past. So both of these guys, it's not insane. Crazier things have happened in the NFL than Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow getting traded. Let's see. Mr. Mayor, how do you say that? Like it's fate. Like it's fate that Kirk is coming back. Yeah, I mean, the question is he willing to compete? I don't think so. I do not think that Kirk Cousins would sign here unless the job is his. The experience over the last 2 years of not being the guy and then coming in and winning games with the Falcons, I don't think that Kirk is going to say, you know what? Sure, I'll drop into the Vikings and then I could risk my maybe last season in the NFL just sitting behind and watching JJ McCarthy start. No. He's got to be guaranteed that he is coming. And remember who his agent is, by the way. He's not going to let Kirk make any mistakes. I guess you could say the Falcons was a mistake, but it certainly wasn't financially. The point just being that I don't see it. There are other teams that are in desperate quarterback situations. Now, that would be the only spot, though, if every other team told Kirk, nah, we're just not, you got to compete with whoever. We're going to draft somebody. You're going to be our backup. If every other team that's interested or needy of a quarterback told Kirk, this could be like an Andy Dalton situation where Dalton was a locked in starter for a long time. And then it just got to a point where it's like, nah, you're just a veteran backup. And he kept playing in the NFL because I don't know, he likes football. But if I'm Kirk, I'm going to, I don't know, there's probably 8 to 10 teams that are quarterback needy. And maybe some of them would like to, like a Fernando Mendoza, like draft a quarterback number 1, but also because Kirk is in a position where he knows he's not a long-term guy. So maybe in that type of spot, he would accept a brand new drafted quarterback, go to the Jets or something and say, all right, you're the starter, but if you play poorly, we're going to turn it over to our guy, or if we're losing or whatever, and he might have to agree with that. In this situation, I think he would have to be told here, because if you're Kirk also, I don't think you can go back to, there's some sort of high school reunion metaphor working in my brain. Like you can't just go back to your old high school and not be like the man, right? You can't just go back and not be cool anymore. So I don't know. It didn't work, but I tried to get there. I think you know what I'm saying. Let's see. Zoomer, how different would things feel if they had signed someone like Jacoby Brissett instead of Darnold? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it would feel if Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback in 2024, I think they would have made the playoffs. And honestly, you wouldn't, the only difference, because you would have lost in the first round of the playoffs if you made it. They had a pretty healthy schedule in 2024. It wasn't the easiest in the league, but it wasn't the hardest in 2024. They made the wild card round anyway. They didn't win the conference, so that would have been similar. Even if they got to 9 or 10 wins with Brissett, it just would have been no question about moving on. They would have said, thanks, Jacoby. Appreciate your time, bro. Fun season. We're going to go to JJ McCarthy. And it would have been like, okay, there's no conflict. There's no regret. If Jacoby Brissett goes to Arizona and throws for a lot of yards and doesn't win games, like you're not saying, even if Jacoby Brissett won 14 games, you'd be like, you never saw that come. That's crazy. But you wouldn't have said, but with Darnold, he was so talented. He was a number 3 overall draft pick. He won a lot of those games with his arm. The Seattle game, the Atlanta game, 5 touchdowns. Like there were games where they won because of Sam Darnold's ability to throw the football. That probably wouldn't have happened with Jacoby Brissett very often. So you're right. If they had picked like the Joe Flacco, the Brissett, and they just rode that out, that we probably would have been like, okay, well, McCarthy struggled, but there's no regrets about the decision. What makes the decision look so bad is that Sam Darnold, I mean, yes, played this well in Seattle, but also that you could have seen it coming. When you look at, and I've gone through this, I know, but when you go through the history of guys who perform like that, you just can't find anybody who didn't work out. That 4,300 yards at 35 touchdowns. I mean, anyone who's got stat head for Pro Football Reference can run that inquiry, but The history of guys who perform like that, there's not many that didn't turn out to at least be a top 12 quarterback. And the history of guys who didn't play very much in college who were thrown right into the mix, the Alex Smiths, the Mitch Trubisky's, the Mark Sanchez's. I mean, a lot of them won games, but the Ryan Tannehill, some who worked out just needed more time. And then the other ones were kind of game managery and then fizzled out. Like the history's not great on either side of that. And they just said, you know what? We're different. We're different than what all the research says about this. And also, the research also says like you can't judge a guy by 1 or 2 games. I still, it's going to be difficult for Darnold to win the Super Bowl. And I'm sure that some people will be like, see if, they'll do that game. But if you win at this level, this much, you are just a great quarterback. And I think that they overrated how much they did to make Darnold a great quarterback and underrated how much he did to make Sam Darnold a great quarterback. 4th and 8, brilliant idea. Yeah. Well, hey, now 2022, the passing game, checking down there, that feels like, it's just when you watch some of these other games after this year, you go, what league are we in? Like, where did we go? What is the standard for passing? Completing 57% of your passes. I mean, you watch these other quarterbacks are at 70%. And the accuracy is twice as good. And you're like, well, that's a long way to go to get to even a 2022 level of Kirk Cousins. Scruff McGruff, Crime Dog, Chicago, Illinois must be, says Kirk Cousins would just be a 1-year stopgap and some stability. That's about it. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. It would be a give us time to find a real answer situation. And maybe even if you're bringing back Kirk, to me, you're completely done with JJ McCarthy and maybe you're drafting a quarterback. I mean, in a proper world, you should be taking all the shots possible, which they won't do because they have to win. But in like a theoretical world, that's what you would do is you would just draft another quarterback because you'd be done with McCarthy. And I agree that it would be a stopgap situation. And maybe there's a world where McCarthy sits behind Kirk and develops, and maybe Kirk gets hurt, plays some games, gets some more reps underneath his belt, and then has another competition the following season and takes that big step that everybody's looking for. Like, it doesn't have to mean that his career is over, but the world works that way, that normally with a starting quarterback who you've drafted in the first round, as soon as you bench them, that's the end of that quarterback. Like 95% of the time. It's rarely like a Steve Young, Joe Montana situation with the starter and the backup. But you're right that it would be just a stopgap. It would be like survive the season, make the playoffs. So let's see. Could you comment on the link I sent to reporters that the Giants, Texans, Broncos took the Flores suite to the Supreme Court and now try to reverse a lower decision? Yeah, I haven't really investigated the latest on that. I'll take a look. I'll take a look at that. The last way that I would just phrase it is that it's ongoing, and the NFL has tried some different things to make it stop going so far. But the legalese is a little bit challenging for me. Isn't that great that I have to be a doctor when there's injuries and a lawyer when there's lawsuits and all that sort of stuff? Let's see. Zed said rather suck than keep playing JJ and Kirk. Well, that is a fair take. And from your seat and my seat, that's the right take. I think you would rather play JJ McCarthy all year long and just see what happens and have it go wrong and then really, really know and not have this door still open than have Kirk Cousins come in here and win 9 games. For sure, or 10 games. Like you would rather do that. And that was one of my main arguments about Rodgers. And it was in Kevin Seifert's piece, who I'm going to talk with tomorrow for the show, about how like they didn't go with Rodgers because they just thought there were limitations there. I would feel the same way about Kirk. That like nothing personal, just so everybody knows, but Your ceiling, that was always the issue that I had when he was here. Like, your ceiling is limited. And now, are you willing to accept the limited ceiling? Well, it would be to save your bacon because the pressure is on and you don't get 5 seasons without playoff wins, usually. Shadur. Now, I'm going to let Shadur continue to be the problem of the Cleveland Browns. Let's see. Ron says, I don't know how you fit Jackson, Burrow, or Herbert with the present salary cap dilemma. Oh, you find a way. You just find a way. There's always a way. The way is an extension. That's what you do. Is you can make that work by, if you trade for that person, you give them an extension. I don't know. The Herbert name is out there. I don't know why. I mean, Herbert doesn't seem to have any bad blood with the Chargers, does he? They're in the playoffs. He's played really well. I think he's probably frustrated, I would guess, with their offensive line, but that wasn't their fault. They just got a bunch of injuries. Friends of Taz says the special teams play and drop passes were the reason the Packers are playing this weekend and not the Vikings. That's not true. That's not true. The Vikings had one of the best special teams in the NFL per expected points added, like top, I think Seifert tweeted out, it was like top 6. So that's definitely not true. Some of the big plays, but you know what? Here's the crazy thing. If your quarterback doesn't play horribly against the Bears and the Packers, those miscues on special teams don't ruin your season. Also, every other team can point to little things that cost them games just like you. You're not alone in that. Every team in the NFL can go to their losses. How about the Rams? They could go to their losses and be like, kicker missed one wide right because maybe he didn't, jog enough laps. And they had a kick blocked in Philadelphia is how they lost that game. Well, I guess they're a 14-win team instead of 12 or whatever. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. If you didn't rank 25th in scoring or whatever they finished, then you'd be a good team. But you did, so you're not. That's what it really came down to. I'm not drop passes too. I mean, they did drop passes, but they didn't drop passes at a rate that was much higher than anybody else. And the adjusted, I've gone through this, but I can look it up again. We can look it up again. We can always do that. Let's see. Because PFF does an adjusted completion percentage for drops, which is a nice little stat because they like to factor that in. And where did JJ McCarthy finish? 37th out of 45. So I don't know how much. And look, they might have been closer. They might have made the playoffs, but to kind of rewrite the season that way, I just don't think you could do it. You're 4-8 at one point. You just can't really do it. Let's see. Friends of Taz, Florio reported that a team with a coach that has reached out for Harbaugh, maybe that's the reason the press conferences. You guys love your conspiracies. I'm not getting into that. I saw way too much of that. I'm just not getting into it. I'm just not going to go there. You guys love your conspiracies, though. I will say that. Let's see. The Magic Scientists really don't want to lose Flores and have Raheem Morris at DC. Stefanski in Baltimore and Harbaugh in Cleveland would be awesome, though. Yeah, I think Harbaugh, if they need a real culture type of coach who's a pro that can maybe take the keys a little bit away from their owner. And it is interesting that they're keeping their general manager because if I'm the head coach there, I would say no way. Or if I'm a head coaching candidate for Cleveland, absolutely no way am I going to a team that has a general manager there who's been there for years and will likely be on the hot seat. And then guess what happens? If you don't succeed in year one, he gets fired. You probably get fired along with them, as opposed to a regime that builds together. I would stay as far away from Cleveland if I'm pretty much anybody as possible, unless they fire their GM, which did happen with the Jaguars last year. That's how they got Liam Cohen. So don't count that out. That is possible. Let's see. Adrian, if Kyler Murray is released, what does his contract look like for a team to sign him? Will a team pay all of his salary or half? Well, if he's released, then you don't have to do anything. If he's released, he's just released. He's just a free agent at that point, which is very plausible because, I see what you're saying. Like the offsetting. Oh, the offset. I forgot about the offsetting. Yeah, there is the offsetting. You're right. When Russell Wilson was let go and then signed with the Steelers, I don't know about that. If there's offsetting language in a contract or not, I'm sure we would find out. But that is enticing, because if you could get him with the offset language, and this is where we all have to be like capologists and lawyers, but that would mean that you're paying an incredibly low amount for Russell Wilson. I think, what were the Steelers paying, like the league minimum or something for him? And then the Broncos were paying the rest. That's an interesting thought, Adrian. Could make Kyler Murray a very enticing pick. The only reason for me not to have Kyler Murray is if you believe in JJ McCarthy. That's really it, is to not go after Kyler Murray. If you're the front office and coaching staff and you fully believe in JJ McCarthy and his ability to take a next step next year and be coachable and get the offense down and be more consistent and improve his accuracy and all those things and stay healthy, if you could check those boxes, then you don't touch Kyler Murray. But if you feel like you can't, then you're right about that if there's that offset language. But even then, how much do you really think Kyler Murray's going to get? I mean, Justin Fields did get $20 million last year, so maybe that's kind of where you're looking at. That's where I would be looking. But even then, I don't think the interest is going to be that high in Kyler Murray. I really don't. I don't think there's going to be 15 teams making calls to Murray. I think it's just going to be a couple. Even Sam Darnold last year only had a couple teams looking at him, because most teams have their plan to draft a quarterback if they're not going to find a veteran. But with Murray, you'd be concerned about, the leadership or whatever, the connection with coaches. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that expensive. Probably somewhere in the range of 30 million guaranteed over 2 years, which is what Justin Fields got. It was 40 total, so 20 million per year, but you can adjust that. If there's the offset language though, yeah, I mean, man, that makes a lot of sense. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I shot you 99. Highly disagree with the Kyler Murray option. Murray does not play under center, and I don't see him being a great fit for KOC's scheme. I think the scheme issue is a concern. Let's see. Can we find? You're right about having to play out of the shotgun all the time. Although, I mean, didn't Kirk play a lot out of the shotgun early in his first year? I mean, this offense does you. I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. Is it a great, perfect scheme fit for what they want to do? No, I don't think so. And something in my research for this article I'm working on with all the quarterback options, which is taking a long time to get all of them gathered. But Murray's deep ball has not been good over the last 3 years. He was great 2021, but his numbers throwing the ball down the field have really declined. That could be because of the weapons. It also could be that teams have now started taking away the deep ball. There's a huge decline in 20-plus yard passing over the last couple of years, explosive plays down the field, which also, might hurt KOC's offense, but they were able to survive it last year. Where Murray was really good was actually the intermediate stuff, which is a main staple of this offense as well. That's the hard part, because, when he played with DeAndre Hopkins, man, that guy had a million catches, but they do like to attack the middle of the field. So is Kyler Murray out of the shotgun? Can you run as effectively? You make a good point there. The fit is not the greatest, but also when you compare the resume and the talent from Kyler Murray, number 1 overall pick, who has had good seasons in the past. Some of them, I think 2024 was a very good season for Kyler Murray when you really go pick it apart. They went 8-9 because they're not a good team, but his season was pretty darn good. It was a top 12 season. If you go to the next guy, it's Geno Smith or Kirk Cousins, if you need to replace JJ McCarthy. And if you give me the choice between Kyler, hey, figure it out, work around it, and Geno and Kirk, I think only one of them has a percentage chance where that clicks and you're really good. And that's Kyler. And he'd be frustrating at times. We know that. And it would be fun at times. That would be a change from this year. But he's the only one that you could actually see being the Sam Darnold that somebody rejected and didn't want and then had it click in. But certainly you're right about the schematic issues, which I would definitely get deep into if they made that move. Let's see. Cup of Joe Mamas, is that what that is? Says if Flores stays plus Kyler Murray, that would definitely be an interesting team and KOC's first playoff win. It would definitely be an interesting team. KOC's first playoff win, I think the ceiling for a Kyler Murray team, if he was here with the Vikings, would be you win 10 or 11 games, and then you go into the playoffs with a chance to win the first playoff game. You have a great defense, offensive line. If you go through Arizona, you're talking about one of the worst franchises in the league. So at very least, you'd be taking a jump forward. Look at the weapons that he had last year. A rookie Marvin Harrison, who's just okay, but certainly not great. Threw to his tight end a lot. Trey McBride, a lot of intermediate and underneath type of stuff from Kyler Murray. A good amount of scrambling, but he didn't scramble as much in the past. He actually played on time a lot more than he did in the past. Last year, when you look at his snap to release time for passing, I think last year he was a much better pocket quarterback than he had been by the numbers, but it still is a concern of, can you see down the field? Can you throw, trusting the timing and the rhythm and everything else? That's something to certainly ask. But if you had a top 5 to 7 defense, think about if you had this year's defense and what Kyler Murray did last year, you're an 11 or 12 win team. I think it's going to be hard to repeat exactly what this defense did because you're likely going to lose Harrison Smith, but still. Let me remind you of a couple things. Number one, the FanDuel question of the day. I know you guys love talking about Caleb Williams and Jordan Love for the Bears-Packers playoff game. You just couldn't have designed it any more for Vikings fans not to want to watch, but Jordan Love's over-under on FanDuel is 220.5 and Caleb Williams is 208.5. Which one of those quarterbacks do you think has a better chance of stepping up his game in the postseason, Caleb Williams or Jordan Love? And want to remind you about our friends at ZipRecruiter. You guys know Purple Insider is always growing, looking to take steps forward. And I'm lucky to have my crew, but as a business owner, I'm aware of the challenges of trying to find quality people. So if you are in that same spot for your company, give you a little advice, check out ZipRecruiter. With new goals in 2026, you may be looking to add to your squad. And thankfully, there's a place where you can do that and conquer these challenges and hiring goals for the new years. That is ZipRecruiter. Right now, you can try it for free. ZipRecruiter.com/audio. And they have a lot of tools and data and different things like that to play with and try to help you find the best possible candidate. They've got matching technology to find top talent without wasting time. And you can find out right now how many job seekers there are in your area. Let ZipRecruiter help you find the best people for all of your roles. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter find a quality candidate the first day. See for yourself. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/audio. That is ZipRecruiter.com/audio. The smartest way to hire. Okay. Jim says, let me get a drink here. Okay. Jim says, liked your original idea to make KOC and the team live or die with the JJ decision. So the reason that I changed my feeling on that was what happened the last 2 weeks with the injuries. It's really hard to say to them. It's really unrealistic. Like, yes, theoretically, that's the right thing. Because if it crashes and burns, then you know that he was a bust. It's over. You know that they couldn't elevate him. You know that you wasted these 2 years of good rosters and you blow the whole thing up. Or the high end is that it works and you make the playoffs and JJ's good. And wow, what a turnaround for the 2026 Minnesota Vikings. Theoretically, yes, that's still a strong take. And I'm very proud when I have a strong take that's hard to defeat. The problem is that when you now are going on 5 career injuries and you've missed time due to major knee surgery, ankle injury that keeps you out 5 weeks, a concussion, and multiple games where you can't stay in because of a hand, how can I look at the Vikings and say, sorry guys, you got to live with that? You just can't. When who knows whether he'll get better, but he didn't even really play. When you're talking about how many passes he had, what was it? 243 that he ended up with? 243. How many did the league leader end up with? I'll just do dropbacks. Of course, it's freaking Bo Nix. Bo Nix, 680 dropbacks for Bo Nix this year. And JJ McCarthy ended up with this is dropback, so it includes sacks and scrambles, 291. So way more than double the dropbacks for Bo Nix than for JJ McCarthy. And he finished 31st in crazy stat alert. This is crazy. This just blew my mind. Kirk Cousins came in for Michael Penix more than halfway through the year, right? And had as many dropbacks as JJ McCarthy. Same exact number, 289 to 291. Kirk was a backup for half the year and dropped back to pass as many times as JJ did this year. That shows you how little he's played football. So that's also hard to deal with. Like it's hard to ask them to do that. It's just that's the thing. Realistically versus theoretically. Theoretically, it's pretty sound. Realistically, you just can't ask him to do it. So that's why we're going through all of the different people. Sorry, I lost the message of talking about a left tackle in the draft. We could do a draft sim at some point if you want. A left tackle in the draft, I just don't think makes sense. I mean, look, you got to give Darrisaw a chance to get healthy. He's a special player. I would not want to bail on Christian Darrisaw, but it's not crazy. It's not crazy. And it actually speaks to my draft philosophy, which is you don't draft to fix stuff right away. You draft down the road. But I think no matter what, they do need probably a top corner, a center. But, like I said, it's not insane. If that's the best person on the board and you're thinking long-term about left and right tackle, you could do it. But the Vikings are put in a position, and look at how they drafted this year with Donovan Jackson, who I really, really like, and I think he's great. But a guard is a draft pick to fix something right now. And if they're already doing that, then they're probably looking at doing that into the future as well. Mr. Mayor, I wonder if the Flores lawsuit has changed the league's hiring practices. Seems like there's a lot more person of color coaches now. Oh, I think it has. I think it had a very serious impact of saying, like, this is enough, man. This is enough. Like, we're really going to do something about it now. And there was and I think they didn't do that this year. I don't know why, but there was an event that they had that Matt Daniels was involved in. I think Keenan McCardle for coaches to get together with owners and executives and meet them to just try to make those connections. So the stuff has been done more, I think, in recent years. Is it fixed? No, but you're right that I think there are more candidates and more coaches that are getting opportunities because Flores put the light on that. Zoomer KO, every single coach studied Flores and his defense last offseason and learned to copy it. Still, his was fresh and elite. Yeah, I know. And he was able to adjust in the middle of the season to some new players. Caleb, is it just me or does KO seem like KO is irritated, annoyed, and doesn't like JJ much? Press conference, etc. He has the whole season thoughts. Yeah, I think anytime that something is not working, you're going to be frustrated. And I have wondered about like the connection between those two, but think about when you've seen those things. It's when he was out and unavailable and people are saying, did you bench him? And all those types of things, right? I'm sure that was very frustrating to him that he was being accused of benching, McCarthy. And yeah, I mean, the end zone thing coming out, dancing into the end zone thing coming out was certainly some evidence there. But anybody who can't stay on the field, I also think that the theatrics of McCarthy with the injury, it's just not how it's done in the NFL. And Kevin O'Connell, he's been in the NFL for so long. I just don't know that he's looking at this and going, this is how a superstar quarterback like Matthew Stafford acts, which is a lot to ask for somebody who's young and hasn't done it before. But you could see where that frustration, the performance, all the weekly injuries and drama, it would add up on you. And these coaches, they work, 19 hours a day or something. But that's a factor. How much he likes him is a factor. I just don't want to sit here and say, I know that O'Connell doesn't like him. I think that what you're picking up on, it could be that he's frustrated with him. It could be that the season was just not anywhere what they thought it was going to be. Miles says, Matthew, has there been any reporting on why we opted for JJ over Darnold? Did KOC mess up the assessment, or was there Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah pressure via cap considerations? Yeah, so I don't think that this is really a mystery of why they went to JJ McCarthy. It was their plan all along. And when those last two games went the way that they did, they looked at the roster and you can see it right there. And I really don't think that they've hid from this in their public commentary, that you look at the roster last year and you go, why did the Rams win that playoff game versus the Minnesota Vikings? They won that playoff game because they had a better defensive line than the Vikings had an offensive line. And because the Vikings could not pressure Matthew Stafford up the middle, that also mattered because they didn't have a run game that they could counterpunch with, right? And also, if you go back to Sam Darnold's history, Kevin O'Connell looked like the guy who whispered it into existence. Now, some of us may or may not believe in quarterback whispering, but that's what it looked like. It looked like we could take a talented but flawed quarterback who hadn't had a lot of success and plug him into our system, our weapons, new offensive line that's better, running game that's better, defense that's elite, kicking game that's really, really good. And as long as he can do anything, it will be similar results. He doesn't have to play exactly like Sam Darnold, but it will be similar results. And I don't think they thought they were going to win the Super Bowl this year, but they thought they'd be right there. And what they did not factor is that Sam Darnold is actually just really good. That's one. Number two, and so a lot of that success was just Sam Darnold and this thing that's attached to his body on the right side. It's one of the best arms I've ever seen in my life, and a lot of the plays that he made last year are just a dude having an insane arm. And it's not just arm speed, like throwing the ball. It's the ball would just glide. It would just cruise through the air. It just was crazy to watch him and Sam Bradford, the two guys, where I was just like, I can't believe how these throws, the parabola of it, the smoothness of it. And he was able to make a lot of those plays under duress and everything else. But it really was the perfect fit for an offense that wanted to go downfield and required anticipation throws all the time. But what they thought was, if we bring back Sam Darnold and we do not improve the roster in these areas, we will end up with 9 wins. And then everyone will say, why didn't you just go with JJ McCarthy? That was their thinking. And with McCarthy, we also have to go back. And if you can do this, if you want, if you've got time, go back and watch me and Dane Mizutani talk after the Vikings' first preseason game in 2024, where McCarthy plays. And because I did this not that long ago. And what I was saying and what Dane was saying was, this may be a preseason game, but this is everything we've seen in practice from him. We've seen him throwing bullets. We've seen him using his athleticism. We've seen him getting better. We've seen the teammates galvanizing around him and already kind of feels like he's the guy for this franchise. And O'Connell, which I'm sure he regrets it now, but when he said it feels like we've got our franchise quarterback, he wasn't BSing. That was the feeling from everybody there. And then you have a catastrophic injury, which I think they thought he would pick up right at that spot, and he didn't. He had to go all the way back to square one. And then you're talking about, we got to get a guy ready this fast. And they only got to see him before they made the Rodgers decision. They only got to see him at like not rookie, but maybe a mini camp, maybe an OTA. And then Rodgers kind of needed a decision from the Vikings. It's like, well, like, what do you do here? You liked everything that you saw from 2024, and you felt like this is all he's got to do. He knows the offense. He's been working on it. He's been watching Darnold run it. He's just got to pick up where he left off. And the NFL is super hard. So that's maybe the part that they didn't factor in, was also that just because you've got the money, think about who their best signings were this year. Eric Wilson and Isaiah Rodgers, and trading for Jordan Mason, I think, was a really good idea too. Those were not expensive moves. the expensive moves oftentimes are not the ones that work out the best. I just noticed this the other day, and Milton Williams has been good with New England, that like Jalen Redmond has, I think, as many or more pressures than Milton Williams for 25 million. It's not always the most expensive move. Van Ginkel was not the most expensive move. Byron Murphy was not the most expensive. It's not always that guy, because oftentimes if that guy's getting let go, there's a reason. And I think that maybe they didn't think of that either. Let's see. So the Magician asking a similar question. Do you think KOC dislikes McCarthy? Seems like a good dude, but I could see his personality rubbing people the wrong way. Here's what I think. So as far as like how someone is good dude, bad dude, I don't like to get into that, even if I know the person, because I don't really know the person. Like, I've been around Justin Jefferson long enough for Harrison Smith to be able to say pretty definitively, but even then you never really know what someone's like outside of when the media is around. So I don't like to try to get into, well, I think he's a great guy, I think he's a bad guy. That always kind of, I don't want to be wrong about that. So I never want to say for sure. But what I think is that JJ McCarthy feels to me like, I'll give you an example with some interns that I've had. Those of you who have listened to this show for a really long time would remember intern Paul and intern Haley. Intern Paul was a 38-year-old man in a 21-year-old body. I don't know why. He was really mature. He totally got it. Like, our environment, we have our own little culture as well. Journalists do. He just totally got it right from the very beginning. And I was like, this kid's a pro already. And he needed to work on his skills, but he was a pro already. I've had other interns that I felt like did not get this at all. And Haley was just so freaking smart that, whatever. But she was so mature that she went and worked for the Detroit Lions in their front office. And that was a couple of years ago. I don't even know if she's 25. Like, some kids are like that. Here's me calling them kids. But right, like, some people come out of college, they've got it figured out. You've known people like this in your life. They've got it figured out. And there are other people who come out of college and need time to figure it out, where they're going, what they're doing in their life. And I would say that even for myself, I didn't really get into the journalism world until probably 24, 25, somewhere in that range before I got my first job. And that time in between, I don't know if I was totally ready for that. And I think with McCarthy, I'm not sure that he's more like intern Paul, where he just understood the environment right away with his personality and where he was at. That, I think, might be a bit of a disconnect with a head coach who's coached Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, Matthew Stafford, guys who are just locked in pros from day one. And he did, I think, carry himself very professionally in 2024 training camp. And I don't think that he's been unprofessional here either. I think that there's just a bit of a gap between where you need to be as a leader of a franchise and the things that you do and the things that you say. And maybe just understanding a little bit better that the world's not going to sort of sit around and just tolerate whatever from you. Bad play or dancing into the end zone when you're not supposed to or whatever, unless you perform. That's the NFL. When he says like, oh, well, I'm only this age or whatever, it's like a lot of quarterbacks' careers end at that age, bro. Like, you have to kind of realize that the franchise will not wait around forever for you. And that if you're the head coach of the football team tells you not to do something, you do not do that something. And if you're Brett Favre and Mike Holmgren says, hey, Brett, don't run here, and you do, okay, that's a little different because you're one of the great quarterbacks of all time. If you're a young quarterback like this and you've proven nothing, you have to follow the steps of what your coach wants you to do. And it just feels like, how did somebody put it to me the other day that he kind of, it feels like he thinks he's sort of the main character in a movie with some of the stuff that he says and ways he act, which is like, a younger kid. But this is real life, So, and the theatrics that Ben Lieber referred to, that's what I kind of thought. And I thought a lot of this stuff is just young and inexperienced, and you go through it and you learn. And if you had 5 years to learn this, it's not a fair world. It's not a fair world that Brian Flores isn't a head coach. It's not a fair world that JJ McCarthy didn't go to a team that was going to take their time with him. He went to a team that was very quickly going to get in a spot where they needed him to be great. That's just my read on it. Trying to figure out who likes who doesn't like who based on press conferences and some body language. But I mean, if you were KOC, you'd be frustrated where you start him and then he gets hurt and then he comes out and then he doesn't tell you at first and then he just fumbles. And KOC cares about every single win, right? This isn't the Minnesota McCarthy's. I mean, KOC's here to win, and you go give up a fumble touchdown because you didn't tell the training staff your hand was hurting. It's like, what? So, and then making such a big deal out of it on the sideline the other day, like knowing the cameras are on you maybe and trying to look like you're Mr. Rah-Rah. It's just not how it's done in this environment. I think you can learn those things of how things are done in the NFL, but it's really hard to do under this situation. So I've never gotten the sense that the locker room doesn't like him or they can't stand being around him or something like that. I've never gotten that kind of sense at all. It's just, to me, somebody who needs to be in there, needs to go through things, needs to learn about what works and what doesn't at this level and what the best pros can do. And he was just not really given the time to do that. So I don't know. It's like a convoluted explanation, but I think that there's something there that you guys are picking up on. I just don't want to go to, oh, I just hate some, because that's not right. That seems unfair. And yet maturity, when you say someone is immature, it sounds like they're a drug dealer or something. Like, he's just immature. He's out there causing havoc at the mall. Like that's not really it. Like, maturing can also be in an individual environment, like maturing on the job. So as a reporter, my first job covering the American Hockey League was great for me because I made some mistakes as a reporter there, but I did them while covering the AHL, not covering the NHL. So, you guys wouldn't be destroying me on Twitter or something for asking bad questions or making mistakes as an AHL reporter. But if I was doing it at the NHL level, you see what I mean? Like, minor league baseball players probably I know they do because I broadcasted minor league baseball, some of the funniest mistakes ever, but the team I was doing broadcasting for batted out of order one time. And you're like, what? But stuff like that happens in the minor leagues. You never hear about it. You never see, it's not on Twitter or whatever. People aren't getting roasted. The NFL is the only league, right, where we take younger guys who might not be ready to be in this environment or lead an entire $6 billion franchise and are just like, all right, off you go with, 700 passes in college. So it also just tells you, like, the college environment, how they teach quarterbacks to lead and all that stuff. It's just not what the NFL is. It's very interesting, but it's very hard for me to really put my finger on it exactly and say, I'm sure that it's this, because I'm not sure. Caleb is also interested in Kyler, looking at the numbers, not that bad. Also Mac Jones. Well, that's the thing about Kyler Murray is when you actually go back and look at last season, if you take a minute and go look at what he did last season for Drew Petzing there when they were trying, you can't look at that performance and say, oh, well, he stinks. This is awful. No, you'd say this was a pretty decent season for him. And with Mac Jones, I would say the same thing for when he got his first opportunity as a starter and the way he performed here. It's all good enough to get you in the mix, but it feels like it would take a miracle to get you beyond in the mix. Let's see. Adrian says, what I have problem with Kwesi's drafts is his first round picks aren't the issue. It's rounds 2 through 7. Let's just take a quick look. At rounds 2 through 7. And I mean, how many picks have they even had? And we've got a few picks that have worked out, but how many picks? Okay. So you're just saying rounds 2 through 7, clearly 2022 blew up with Andrew Booth, Ed Ingram, Brian Asamoah, Caleb Evans, Asazia Tomowo, Ty Chandler, Vidarian Lowe, and then in the 6th round, Jalen Naylor shows up, and Nick Muse, who they developed over several years and then left. So yeah, that one is the nightmare, just absolutely horrendous draft. Jalen Naylor's a good player. That's the only one that's worked out. But past that, so they had a lot of picks that year. They had 10 picks. Past that, they had 6 selections in 2023. They took Jay Ward, who's worked out. Mekhi Blackmon started for a different team. In round 3, they didn't even have a second round draft pick. Jaquelin Roy, who did nothing. Jaron Hall did nothing. Dwayne McBride, who did nothing. So they got one day 3 guy in Jay Ward who's become a contributor and might be a good player. And for some reason, they just didn't want Mekhi Blackmon anymore. I don't understand that still. 2024, they obviously the tragedy with Kyrie Jackson, who I think was very promising, but they drafted 17th and didn't pick again till 108th. Like, when you're talking about this, oh, it's the other rounds. When did they pick? What do we call those other rounds? We call them dart throws. If you're not throwing the darts, then you're not hitting the most bullseyes. And it's hard to accept because you love the draft. You guys all love the draft so much, and you expect them to find some of these players. But go through any team and like how many per selection. If a team has 10 picks on day 3 and they get 3 right or 2 right, it's going to be like, wow, great job. But that's about the rate. It's about 10 to 20%. Michael Juergens, Levi Drake is a significant player, and Will Reichard might be the best kicker in humanity has ever created. I mean, right there, like you need to adjust what your standard is. But if you draft in the 7th round a solid backup center, the number 1 kicker in the league, and a starting defensive tackle, like you've done a pretty darn good job in comparison. This is my point. And then this year, my goodness, Ty Felton, who I think can be a good player, Ty Ingram Dawkins, Kobe King, who they got rid of, Gavin Bartholomew, who was hurt. That is 4 draft picks? I mean, this is my thing. I just keep coming back to, like, you're not going to hit on them if you don't have them. So if you want to say this is the right framing of the drafting for the Minnesota Vikings. Overall, they have done right on as well as you'd expect for first round draft picks. Let's just put McCarthy aside. It's a whole different thing. That's the head coach. That's the organization. That's just the guy you had to pick because 4 other quarterbacks were taken. Also, let's put McCarthy aside from the discussion. You miss completely on scene. Dallas Turner has now looks like a player on the rise and had a good season. Led the team in sacks, had more sacks than Jared Verse. So let's say it's a good season. And Donovan Jackson to me is a player on the rise and had a good season. So 3 out of, and Addison we know has been in the star level. This year was not great, the quarterback play, and he didn't play that well. But Addison is a hit. So they've drafted what? How many first rounders? Is that 5? How many did I just count? Seen, Addison, McCarthy, Turner, Jackson. So that's 5. McCarthy decision is different as a quarterback, whatever. Out of the other 4, we've got one guy that was a horrific bust. One guy who's shown a ton of potential is on the rise. Another guy who's shown a ton of potential who's on the rise. And another guy who became one of the better wide receiver 2s in the NFL. And when you're saying, well, it's the rest of the draft picks. And my question is, where are the rest of the draft picks? Well, they've been traded away for Cam Akers 4 times or for Cam Robinson or for whatever. And not only that, but you have to consider too, that they have just not had any comp picks, which I make fun of a lot, but it's only because people ask constantly, do we get a comp pick for that? I'm like, can we just wait till they announce it? But if you don't get any because you're constantly signing players as opposed to letting go players who sign elsewhere, what happens? You don't have a lot of draft picks. So all of what's happened here is the accumulation of an all-in mindset to a window, because that's what you do when you are all in on a 14-win season, or going back to the Hawkinson deal where you're all in on a 13-win season, or when you are looking at your roster going, I'd love to develop Mekhi Blackmon, but he's not the best player right here, right now, so get rid of him. Or I'd love to develop Nahshon Wright, but he's not the best player right here, right now, Fabian Morrow. Those are decisions from a team that really thinks they're going to win the Super Bowl. It's not long distance. It's not a 5-year approach. It's we set this all up to win right here. And that's why it is so crushing when you're sitting home watching the playoffs and you've done that. But in terms of like how many late round picks they've hit versus how many they've had, I mean, somebody else can do this if you want to, but you know, a Naylor, a Jay Ward, a Will Reichert, a Levi Drake Rodriguez, a Michael Juergens, like this is what you expect. It's not very often. And some of these guys, the book's not written yet. But that's about what you expect. Like Diggs just doesn't happen very often. Though you do need to get one of them, but they picked Michael Pruitt before Diggs to show you how much in that same round, how much these are just dart throws, is that they picked Michael Pruitt in the same round before Diggs. So they didn't know. They had no idea. They'll just tell you later that they did. Does Van Ginkel leave with Flores? No, he can't. He signed an extension. Maybe eventually, but he signed an extension. Yeah, I mean, Scruff McGruff says need to figure out the middle rounds. So what do we call the middle rounds? Like 3 through 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They've had 6 selections in those rounds. 6 since that disaster 2022 draft. 6. What's your odds of hitting on picks, 3 through 5 rounds? Not very much. So that's the thing. I think what you guys are saying is you need to collect draft picks, take a lot more shots at it, which would be a good idea if they were in a different spot. I'm not defending the idea in general. The idea in general of trading back, collecting more picks, developing players is a great idea. And if we go back, so yes, 2022 was a disaster, but when they take over this regime, the idea was the competitive rebuild. If the idea had been a full rebuild, wow, I mean, that would have been really, really bad, of course. But if it had been a full rebuild, you're probably drafting a bunch more times in 2023, a bunch more times in 2024. You're probably drafting higher in 2024. Here's how I know. Chicago picked at the top. I know that was the trade with Carolina, but you know what I mean? Like, why did they get the trade with Carolina? Well, because they made tanking moves to do it, right? To be in that position. So the point just being is that if you want to get hits on draft picks, you have to collect a bunch of them and be Detroit or be Chicago, where you've just got a million of these selections and you can miss, if you're Detroit, on half of that draft, but no one remembers it because you hit on some too, but you picked 10 times in the first, 100 picks or whatever. And that's exaggerating a little, but I've gone through this, a number of times, but they've had half the number of top 100 picks from the Packers. It's just harder. It's harder to do it that way. That means you need to nail it. Scruff McGruff, Sean McDermott reminds me of San Diego Marty Schottenheimer. Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good one. I think Allen, this is crazy to say, but I think Allen is a little bit better than Rivers, or chances are better. Mr. Mayer says, I'd say Flores is a better defensive coach than KOC is an offensive coach. Would you have said that a year ago? I mean, I think Flores is probably the top 3 defensive coach. So yeah, you could say that. But I mean, about Kevin O'Connell, would we have said a year ago that O'Connell, at this time, 1 year ago, would we have said O'Connell doesn't know how to coach an offense? Probably not. It's the execution of the quarterback is just everything. And one of my favorite stats there is that Kyle Shanahan who is the best. You need to win a game from an offensive coordinator. I will take all guys drafts who are coaches. I will go Kyle Shanahan. But he's had 3 or 4 different times where his team finished 20th or lower. And what do you think that caused that? Playing Nick Mullins in San Francisco, or having Johnny Manziel / whoever the hell else was there. Like that kind of thing. That's always the case. Let's see. Is this Kylie? My husband is a Ravens fan. This is his dream to get Brian Flores. Well, I mean, this is the thing about these teams not hiring him. If they don't at least look at Brian Flores, they're doing a disservice, because he is a pretty darn good coach. Jonathan Gannon could be an interesting replacement for Flores. I think Gannon is in his right spot as a defensive coordinator, and I think he's good at it. Last year, I think he did a very good job at it, but was not really a head coach. That's a different type of story. So I agree with you, though, that he's someone they would definitely have to look at. Let's see. You guys are really on fire tonight. Mr. Mayor, will the Raiders ever turn into a competent franchise? Normally I think that the answer should be yes. Like they're drafting well, that's what it really is about, right? They're drafting number one. They're going to take Fernando Mendoza, more likely than not, maybe Dante Moore, but probably Fernando Mendoza. And whether he works out or not will determine it. If you go back, I was thinking about this the other day. So remember when in training camp or right before week one, that big Tyler Dunn piece came out about the Bears and just tore them limb for limb with their handling of Caleb Williams, how Caleb responded, all that stuff. And what did we think? Did we think we'd be watching a Bears home game in the playoffs that day? Of course not. But Caleb Williams took a big step forward. All their tanking came to fruition. They got the right coach. And now they went from one of the biggest joke franchises to great. Jacksonville, same sort of thing. And their draft pick didn't even work out at the top right now, but they got the right coach. Their quarterback took another step. They figured things out. You can go from the biggest joke to pretty good really fast if you're not the Browns. But even the Browns, Stefanski got them into the playoffs a couple times. That's how the league is set up, and that's why teams tank. The Jets are really the one that is almost freakish. The Jets are freakish in their ability to be incompetent. It's insane. Like this year's one of the worst seasons I think any team's ever played football in the NFL in the last 25 years for sure. And they're keeping Aaron Glenn. Wow. I mean, that's crazy. Let's see. Scruff says if you trade anything more than a day 3 pick for, I assume anyone, then you're done with McCarthy. I think if they trade a day 2 pick for Mac Jones, they don't have to be. Because if McCarthy wins the job, then you just have Mac Jones as a backup, and he's been a backup for the last 2 years. So, Sam says Kyler and who else are the clear starters over JJ? To me, the only 2 guys that would be, if you get them, then okay, that's just your guy. No matter what. If you get them, that's your guy. Are Kyler Murray and Kirk Cousins. Kirk is not coming back to mess around as a backup. I just can't see that. Unless he gets no other offers whatsoever. But the way he played this year, I think he will. And Kyler is clearly a starting quarterback in the NFL. For somebody, a team started Justin Fields this year, they'll start Kyler Murray. Geno Smith, though, is the level down where it would be competition. I think those are the only 2 guys, unless it's Burrow and Lamar. That goes without saying. I think those are the only 2 guys. Buying the dip. Okay, that's what it was. I was looking for a half an hour ago, a saying from the fantasy world. It's buying the dip. Yep. Not a Twerk says I can't picture anyone replacing my memories of Jeff George. Well, Sam tried last year. Didn't Sam Darnold do a lot of the same stuff? A guy who had been a bust and then came to the Vikings and threw it all over the yard. Adrian says Jimmy G was carried by a dominant run game and the best defense in the NFL. There's a reason why they called the receiver group the Yak Boys. No, I understand Jimmy Garoppolo was not a great quarterback. I think he was a good quarterback, though. But everyone who makes this is the problem. Everyone who makes the Super Bowl, their team is good. So everyone who makes the Super Bowl, you can say, well, that guy's just carried by his team. It happens with Jalen Hurts all the time. I've said this many times on the show, that you will know you made it. Your quarterback has made it when people are saying he's not that great, he's just carried by a great team. Then your franchise has done it. Then you've done it. Brock Purdy, he's not that great, he's just carried by his team. Oh, Jalen Hurts, he's not that great. If they were saying that about McCarthy, you guys would be, you'd be really ticked off probably. But also, I would be telling you, hey, this is great for you. That means you built an awesome team and your quarterback's playing well. Because that's what we do in football, is just say everybody's a fraud or whatever. Like, it's just different levels. If a young quarterback doesn't succeed right away, he's a fraud. If he gets to be good and he doesn't win the Super Bowl, he's a fraud. If he gets to be great, but he doesn't win the Super Bowl, then he's a fraud. It's like, it's a circle of calling everyone a fraud all the time. But if Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough to go to the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl, you had to do a lot right to get there, because the Minnesota Vikings franchise has barely gotten there with all these good players and mostly good coaches and stuff. So I'm never going to be the one who says a guy who took his team to the Super Bowl and NFC Championship, it's just like, yeah, he's just a guy. I think he was more than that. But now Garoppolo I think he was a perfect fit with his coach. I think that's what really it was. But now Garoppolo is much older and has had some serious injuries. He takes a lot of hits. So Jay says would want Murray. Oh, Malik Willis. I'm sorry. I did not include Malik Willis as the other one. If you sign Malik Willis, he's your guy because you're going to have to pay for him, probably a decent amount of money. So if you sign and pay Malik Willis, he's your guy. He goes on that list. Yep, for sure. Let's see. Sam says, let's say the Vikings bring in Mac Jones or someone of that caliber to compete for the job. Do you think it's actually a competition, or do they still go with JJ if it's someone close? They would go with JJ if it's someone close. That's why I brought up the EJ Manuel and Kyle Orton situation, because usually the young guy wins that job at first, and then they see how it goes. And then if he struggles, they have the other guy to go to. And anybody who comes here, that's why you might have to trade for Mac Jones, because anybody who comes here, any other quarterback is going to know that it is favored for JJ McCarthy unless they're out on him. And we talked about that a little bit. They might be. I don't know. I don't think they should be, but they might be. If they're just out on him, then it's different. Then it's Daniel Jones. Oh, he's another one. Okay, so there are more than just Kirk and Kyler. Daniel Jones is another one. He ain't coming here to be a backup, as we learned last year. Let's see. The Magic Man says, if Mendoza's there at 18, do we take him? I don't see any chance that's happening. Theoretical world, absolutely. Just not going to happen. Not the way that he's played this year. He's played like a pro. I think he has top 15 potential. And what Bo Nix and Jalen Hurts and guys like that show you is that, and Jordan Love, is that even if the draft Illuminati does not see you as being the highest ceiling or whatever, if you have the right situation, right coach, right team, it can work. Even if the pre-draft stuff doesn't say you're an instant superstar or overdrafted or whatever it might be. So, let's see. Jay says, will Kwesi be fired before the draft? I would be surprised by that. But if it happened, I would just look around and say, well, John Harbaugh got fired. If you disappoint and you miss the playoffs and you come up short and you make as catastrophic of an all-time mistake as letting go a guy who won the conference and also not drafting the other guy who won the other conference, well, sometimes heads roll. And if that happens, then that's the league. That's how the league works. So I would not be shocked by anything that happens. In the NFL in general, because it's all happened. Last year, wasn't it Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones were like talking for a while, and then they just let him go and hired Brian Schottenheimer, which everyone hated, but then I think he did a good job. Like, I don't know. There's a wide range of scenarios, but normally if you set a bar at a certain spot and then make a catastrophic mistake at the biggest position in football, there are consequences, whether that's hot seats or whatever else. 2 Coke cans. Okay, I get the reference, and come on, man. Says, why would Durante Jones be the in-house replacement for Flores? If anything, Marcus Dixon makes the most sense. I think Durante and his experience is probably a big part of that. And also, like, him and Flores, I think, have really been attached at the hip. And him and Harrison Smith have been majorly instrumental in designing it. So that would be why I would say Durante. But, everyone on the defensive staff has done a good job. They have other candidates there. I just think Durante makes the most sense. Let's see. Jay said, would you all want Downs at safety or Love running back? This is the thing about some of these top players. You're now drafting 18th. You want to do that before we wrap up? I was going to do a spotlight, because I got to get back to writing this article about the quarterbacks. I was going to do a spotlight position thing tonight, but you guys have had such good questions and comments. I haven't gotten there. Let's go look at a draft sim. Why don't we do a draft sim? Let's do that. Let's get to the PFF mock draft simulator. and I like to say teams draft for needs. Let's do 3 rounds. And in terms of positional value, I'm going to say a lot. The league is good at that now. Randomness, let's go less, even though it's all random. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. I think I got it right. All right. So let's get into this mock draft here. I'm not going to make any trades now. We'll have lots of time to do that. Let's just look at who's on the board now at 18. Just a couple weeks ago, we were drafting up here, and now drafting down here because of those wins. So on the board right now, the top guys by PFF, which is, sometimes they differ quite a bit from the rest of the NFL or the rest of the draft people, but just taking a look at positions of need for the Vikings, I don't think edge rusher is a position of need. The top guy on their board is Cassius Howell. Let me look at who was drafted already. So in this mock, Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore go 1 and 2. Caleb Downs goes 3. Very realistic. And Jeremiah Love goes 4. That's why you guys are going to have to readjust your names that you want now that the Vikings are drafting 18th, because guys like Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Love are not going to be there. They're going to get taken. There was a chance they could drop to like 10, but they're not going to be there in this situation. So let's see. Arvell Reese, amazing freak player from Ohio State, goes to the Giants. Carnell Tate, love to watch him. He goes to the Browns. We got Jordan Tyson, a wide receiver, to Washington. Ruben Bain, who I really enjoy watching play football. Peter Woods is another one that was thrown out there for the Vikings, but I think, again, you're just going to have to readjust now that you're drafting in the middle. Defensive tackle from Clemson, Mekhi Lemon, Sonny Styles, David Bailey. Another guy, Mansour Delaney from LSU that I was mock drafting a couple of days ago, and now I'm not because they're picking 18th. And the same goes for Jermod McCoy, who is a cornerback from Tennessee. So a lot of talent, and another corner, Avion Terrell, off the board. So a lot of talent at the position that I liked, and I won't make a point about winning games that don't matter because, it is what it is. So on the board right now, Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle from Florida, is the, 17th best prospect by PFF. Defensive tackle is definitely a position I could see them looking at because I don't think Javon Hargrave's going to be here. We mentioned the idea of a tackle, but you'd really have to be thinking long-term for that. I've seen Caden McDonald play. This guy is a freak at stopping the run, which they could really use. So I don't hate that idea. Caden McDonald, defensive tackle from Ohio State. And I think the run-stuffing freak like a Vita Vea, how big is this guy? Yeah, 6'3", 326. If he's like that, that's got a lot of value. Do have some wide receivers in the mix. We've got a guard here. They don't need that. TJ Parker. Kenyon Sadiq now becomes very interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was really not interested in looking at Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. But now, if TJ Hawkinson is out, then that becomes an idea worth looking at. And the recent history of tight ends has been pretty good of their development paths in the NFL. And now we're a little bit farther down where we've been being like trade down territory, but we've missed on the corners. This is kind of a big deal. We've missed on the corners, and we're basically looking at either Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle from Ohio State, or Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon. I'm just going to go with the tight end here and then see what comes up. But they've won enough games to get themselves kind of out of the mix of some of those top corners. All right, second round, LT Overton, edge rusher on the board here. We've got a guard, a corner, Chris Johnson from San Diego State's interesting to me. I like the idea of Jonah Coleman, the running back from Washington. Running back in the second round has my attention, but I keep going back to interior offensive line. Jake Slaughter, Connor Lew, the two centers that are there. I just don't know what other option you have. And when you look at these centers, there's a couple of guys, and then there's a huge drop-off from those guys in terms of the next center prospect is not until pick 155. Connor Lew is pick 60, and then it's not till 155. And I think Lew has an ACL injury, maybe. Jake Slaughter. Let's see what we got at running backs. Maybe we can get one of those guys to drop and look at running back. Jadarian Price, Jonah Coleman, and then there's kind of a big drop off there as well. So we could take Jonah Coleman or we could take the center. Why don't we Or we could take the corner, Chris Johnson from San Diego State. Why don't we take the corner here? Wow, look at these numbers. A 16 passer rating throwing into his coverage. Why don't we take the development corner, Chris Johnson, and see if we could, we got away with it. The center, Jake Slaughter, dropped into the early part of the third round. So we're just going to not think about it and take the center. And then we have one more pick here. We could take John Mateer as a development quarterback if we want to. I'm not into that. Emmett Johnson, the running back from Nebraska. Well, that's an interesting idea. Why don't we look at running back here? Seth McGowan. I don't know much about a lot of these people. Why don't we just take the running back here and call it a draft? Okay. So here's what we ended up with. Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon with the first round pick, second round pick, corner Chris Johnson from San Diego State. That one got me an A. Jake Slaughter, the center from Florida, and the running back from Nebraska, Emmett Johnson. And there, my friends, you have yourself a mock draft to close out the night. How about that? I've really enjoyed the chat. Sorry to folks if I didn't get to your comments. I know a lot of you, so we're still leaving comments, and I try to work my way through them as fast as I possibly can. But going to have a big show tomorrow night. B+ on that. Thank you. And if you guys didn't answer the FanDuel question of the day, feel free to do that. Get the Connor Lew, the center, would be a good pick. Yeah, cut Hawkinson. Probably going to happen. But tomorrow night, expected to have Kevin Seifert on the show. And we're going to go deep into what happened with J.J. McCarthy. He did awesome reporting on that. And I can't wait to get into it with Mr. Seifert. But I got to save the voice. I can already feel it after a couple hours here of live streaming. So thank you guys so much for a really fun, really just good in-depth chat. We went into a lot of stuff tonight. There's going to be a lot of these in the off season. My plan is to keep live streaming on the same days all off season. We'll have fun. Jonathan Harrison was trying to teach me how to connect my old school video games to my streaming stuff so I could play video games and answer questions. And maybe we'll be able to figure that out at some point in the off season. So thanks for all the questions, but the plan is going to be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, how I've done it. And then any emergency podcasts will be live. So plenty of opportunities. If I didn't get to your question tonight, I'm sorry, but I will in the future. And we'll see what goes on. And when there is a press conference, again, don't worry too much about, internet speculation stuff. Like when there is a press conference and news, we'll have a reaction. So we'll go from there. Thanks everybody. And we'll catch you later. Football